Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion. It's going to be a busy day today. So a general discussion about audio, video, whatever you have questions about around media and virtual production. And our second hour is going to be a ruthless review of our audio systems. How do we sound? So we'll be talking a little bit about that. It's usually a great workshop in just thinking about sound and how it affects it. And it's a very important part of our virtual presentation, whatever that looks like. So anyway, so stay tuned for that. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Lois, what do we have?
Well, first we have Dave Brady from New York, USA. AV rack building, what is the order of stacking and where do you place stuff like power strips, patch panels, etc.?
Good, Courtney.
It's kind of up to the preference of the person. I like to put the power strip as the very top in the back, if it's in the back of the rack. That way, because if I've got other stuff in the front of the rack, I can reach around and turn things on if they have power switches on them, individual power switches, and that makes it easier for me to reach them, and I don't have to walk around to the back of the panel or look in the back of the panel if I'm turning on and off stuff. So that's my preference.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, my favorites are the heavy stuff should go on the bottom, particularly if you have a tall rack, because you definitely don't want it falling on you, which is always going to ruin your day. And I like the meters at the top, the stuff that I usually tweak, which is, in my case, mic processing and other routing devices in the center, and the patch panels sort of below that so that the wires, if they droop, don't get in the way of the instruments.
Go, Jason.
I'm going to go with it depends on what you're racking and for what purpose. The idea is to just make it as neat as possible and as orderly as possible. And, whether that involves putting the power in the back or the patch panels in the back so that you can, cleanly tie things around to the front switches and the router, it really just depends on the size. So as a general rule, patch panels tend to intersperse with switches or be all the way on the top. And then the router is between that and the switches. And then at the bottom, you have your storage.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of those are great answers. Some of the stuff that we think about when we're doing these is thinking about how big the rack is and what are you going to most likely use the most often. So if it's a short rack, and for us a short rack is like, let's say 52 inches, or 55 inches, then a lot of the stuff we're going to have is at the top because we're going to be standing there putting stuff into the back. Whereas if it's a longer rack, it might be in the middle because I don't want to be reaching up or trying to figure out what that is and looking at it. So it really depends on where it's going. A lot of our power strips go down the sides. So they go, if they're in a rack formation, they go down we do PDUs that are going down the side that we have a lot of control over. But even also in the racks, we attach them to the sides pretty often on the inside. We generally have one on the top that is going to be a service one that generally has got a couple open ones. Those are just things that I want to be able to plug into. And then the patch panels are generally in the back, although sometimes we put one in the front. And that way you can just kind of punch into things to see things. If you need to see a feed, you can just punch into it from there. And that might be the only one that we would have as a half normaled punch in, there as opposed to a non-normaled at all. Most of our patches on the back have no normaling in them. So it means there's no pass through, doesn't actually go through. So those are some of the things we think about. A lot of what we think about in the rack in general is how to minimize the number of cables and how to keep them as clean as possible. So that you want to try to, reduce the amount of weight, literally, and also the complexity if something goes wrong. How are you going to get to it? So also think about spacing those backups so that you have arm reach in. If you pack everything into the back, there's nowhere to get to if something goes wrong. The other thing we think about is heat. So like, for instance, hyperdecks don't like to be next to each other. So we have two hyperdecks and then a fan and then two hyperdecks and then a fan. So those are the kind of things that we think about as we start to build those out. Go ahead, Jeff.
So I like your idea of putting patch panels on the bottom. You don't want those cables dangling over the gear that you need to access. Power strip at the top in the back, like Mitchell said, if you can get power strips that are servicing the rack so they have internal outlets, and then if you get ones that also have external outlets, so you're always going to need more outlets to plug other things in. Another thing I like to do sometimes, if there's extra room in the space of the lids, attaching a bag that you can put accessories into that case. So you have remote controls or extra cables, you can have that associated with the case and everything stays together.
I've never done that. It's a really good idea. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I've just finished up a rack last week. It's sitting behind me, and it looks like this. And what I do is I put the heavy stuff at the bottom here, and then I have a power strip for some items that I only want to manually control. And then in the back of the rack, I actually have magnetic power strips by Ubiquiti that allow me to control individual items. In the middle here, you see the patch panels along with the switches and the router. And then, of course, the smaller items at the top.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, just one more thing to add to that. I just finished a full-sized rack for a law firm, 144, I think, eventually Ethernet. I want everyone to look at neatpatch.com, neatpatch.com. These will change your life.
Good. Yeah, most of our patches are Bittree, are the ones that we're using because we're mostly using 12G for what we're doing for video. But these neat patches, this is for Ethernet.
So it's not actually a patch panel. It is this interstitial with a claw that perfectly aligns your cables into the components.
There we go.
Take a look. They're cool.
What is that again? What's the name?
Neat, Neat patch.com.
All right. We'll definitely take that look at that. All right. Next question.
CISO test sources room. What is it? How does it work? Who is using it? Why is it there? Where is it going next? And when will it go to the next level? This is all from Paul Valhoos in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, so the Zoom ISO room, so in after hours, we have a room that is just the Zoom ISO room. And it has 12 of us talking to each other about something. So it's a natural discussion relatively about things. And so basically what it allows us to do is test Zoom ISO with a lot of input. So one of the things we found as we were testing Zoom ISO over the summer, as we get ready for the releases that you saw over at IBC, was that I had to go into Discord and say, hey, can people jump in and can we, and it was just kind of a process to do that when we realized that we should just record everybody talking to each other. And so we did, and now we have 12 PCs that just loop those, and they just join as members of that room, and then it's really a whole conversation that's going on inside of Zoom, for Zoom ISO. So now, if you want to go in with Zoom ISO or anything else, you can go and grab those, put those out. What we're doing is testing those with SDI outputs, and so if we want to try 8 or 12 or even 16, we have to add some people to it. So, but that's something that we're going to keep on scaling. There's a couple different things we want to do is probably add more rooms. There's been a request for a 4-person discussion, an 8-person discussion. And then we're also looking at the ability to do lots of different kinds of shows. So one of the things we realized is it'd be great to have a baseball game. It'd be great to have a corporate event, a music, a concert. Different things where you could have all those feeds, because beyond just learning how to test Zoom ISO, we realized it's the best way to learn how to switch. So you could attach something to it and just grab onto those feeds. So there'll probably be a lot more. We have to figure out exactly how to increase density and make that work so we don't have 100 computers that are all outputting these. But we're still working on that part. But it could be a really great service for people to figure out. Basically, it was funny. I was talking to someone that has a lot of production experience, but not a lot of switching experience. And they were like, I want to just figure out how to use the ATEM. And I said, well, the best way to do it is to get a card and get the outputs and then just start cutting, because that's going to let you build super sources. It's going to let you do a lot of other things there and get a sense of it without having to actually do it. So it's going to be, we think it's a pretty interesting service that we think a lot of people might find useful. So expect more rooms to show up over the next 6 months or so. It takes a little bit of time. It's not trivial to record all those feeds and then play them back. So we're kind of figuring out some of the bits and pieces of that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think that Zoom room is very popular because it showed up at IBC. It might even show up as Zoomtopia. Currently, we have 8 people showing. I did not make the cut.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and for those that don't understand what we're talking about, you might want to explain. You've done pretty well explaining it so far since I posted my hand up. But can you explain the difference between Zoom, what Zoom ISO is versus Zoom, and the difference between the two different levels of Zoom ISO, Lite and Pro, which have different prices?
Yeah, so Lite, I believe, is free, and Pro is something a month. Is it $50 a month?
Lite is $29.95.
Oh, is it $29? Okay.
$45 for Pro.
$29 and $49, $45. So those are the prices of those, and I think Lite goes up to 4 outputs. Is that correct? And I think Pro is unlimited. So as far as the outputs go, and you also get audio, advanced audio outputs from the Pro version, which means you can output all of the feeds, via Dante or loopback or other things like that. So there's a lot more control over audio in the Pro version as you move forward there. But Zoom ISO basically, it really takes Zoom to a production level. It is the first time we've seen. I mean, Skype TX was the only thing we've seen in the past that was really providing us the tools that we needed for a production level connection to WebRTC or some kind of online discussion forum. So Zoom ISO has really created a production solution for that, and a lot of us have been trying to find that for a decade. So we're pretty excited about it. Zoom ISO has a lot of advantages over Skype TX. Skype TX, everyone was isolated. So even if you had 4 people going into the same box, they couldn't see or hear each other. You had to do the cross connect. And because Skype is already much more latent than Zoom, you ended up with a round trip delay of 600 milliseconds, which was, 600 to 700 milliseconds on Skype, which was a real bummer. So anyway, so with Zoom ISO, we're all having a conversation right now. You see 16 of us here, and with Zoom ISO, we're able to we have the low latency connection that we would normally expect out of Zoom, so that's already, we're already enjoying that low latency, but we're able to get all the solid feeds out. And actually, with the new Zoom ISO, we're seeing better color and higher frame rates than we would if we were scraping the screen. So it's actually a production level solution that we expect to continue to get better. So anyway, that's what Zoom ISO is. It also includes Zoom. The Pro version includes a lot of the Zoom OSC tools as well. So there's a lot of advantages there too. Next question.
And Jeff Francis from Columbia, South Carolina writes, last week, Audinate released new versions of Dante Virtual Sound Card and Controller. Has anyone installed and tested these?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I'm asking because I have not, but as a cautionary tale, I'm working with someone who just set up a new Mac Studio and set it up with Dante Virtual Sound Card connected to their Venue CL5 Yamaha PA system. And he texted me the other day and he's like, oh, there's a new Mac OS out. Should I install it? I'm like, no. The answer is no. And there might have been some other words I included in that text back to him to make it emphatic. But no, when you have a production machine that is set up and working, because the next thing I asked him, I was like, have you checked to see if Audinate's compatible? It's going to be a while. And he's like, well, they released some new versions last week. Have you read the release notes? So, be very careful with your production systems. And so these seem to be just bug fixes, these new Audinate Dante Virtual Sound Card and Dante Controller. But they're very careful now that they have separate installers for Intel and for Apple Silicon. So you have to be very careful that you're using the right installer. Definitely read all that stuff ahead of time. But Jason, have you tested these yet?
Go, Jason.
Just as a follow on, my answer to him would have been never, ever, 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 never, ever, 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 never. I've tried I've installed the controller and it's just fine. I have not played with Dante Virtual Sound Card.
John.
Jeff, I was all excited and I went to the site and it's a maintenance release, as you said, and supported platforms. Ventura is not on that list. I'm going to install it on my M1 and check it out, but I'm deflated now.
Yeah, I would take that really slowly. We've definitely, even with the release versions, we've seen some pretty odd idiosyncrasies with DVS. We had some catastrophic errors over the summer that were unrecoverable. so that I think we're an interaction between DBS and the Mac Mini, MIDI controller. And so I think that I would probably take your time. If nothing's broken, if you're not trying to fix something, there's no reason to upgrade, anytime soon. When you're between shows, 6 months after they've released it, and Audinate seems to be slower than most. It's probably because they're doing a lot of custom stuff inside. They're not following, they're not just sitting on the operating system. Folks who write to the operating system, to specifically with Mac or with Apple, if you're just writing it and you're following all the guidelines that Apple gives you, you can generally upgrade very easily and quickly. If you're not following those guidelines, and sometimes you can't, like Loopback and Audinate and other ones are doing things that are deeper into the system. And as a result, there's a lot of reprogramming they have to do. And I would always take that very slowly and carefully, as Jeff said. Next question.
And David Brady from New York says, what kind of AI or machine learning magic did Emile Delaray apply to the Revolver masters to ISO previously bounced tracks? And he has a YouTube link.
Oh, I went down kind of a rabbit hole here. This is it's so cool. I mean, it is so cool. What they're doing is the AI is able to go in, and I don't know what they used. It's probably more advanced than the thing I played with to get ready for this question. But it literally just looks at the track, and it can start deriving all the individual channels. So I took one of my favorite songs there's a band, a very, very unknown band called Corruptor, and they have a song called Separator. I'll just play this for you so you get a sense of what it does. Let's see. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah, a little thin, but we can hear it.
So.
There was a time I had it all, like a singer on the radio saying, in my defense.
You can also so cool. So what it did is I literally uploaded, just so you know, I grabbed that file, I uploaded it to it's an app. This is the app that I just played is by Moises, MOISES.ai. And so I just downloaded it. I paid my $4 or whatever per month, or at least for a month to play with it. Grabbed the file, uploaded it to I just hit go, and about a minute later, it came back down with 5 different separations. And I think about a lot of this, like my daughter's learning the bass. So she plays a couple hours a day, I think. And she's in a couple bands. And so I just realized for her, it's going to be great to just be able to pull the bass out, although she seems to be able to do it without that, but it seems like a nice luxury. Javier?
Yeah, there are a lot of different tools for like AI trying to grab different parts of the song. I'm not sure which one they did use there. The one I like a lot is the Isotope RX10. It has a music rebalance where you can like move the vocals up and down, the bass up and down, the percussions up and down, on all the other stuff up and down. And you can also export the stems. It has worked for me well in different recordings. And the important point is if you want to have perfect ISOs and send it to different things, maybe they're not great, but if you're going to mix them in a new song, the important thing is that they work well together. So even if the rebalances or the stem pulling out is not perfect, if it works when you do the new mix, I think it's good enough.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when I used to read those old music magazines, and in the back on a small ad would be the singer's dream. And it was a box that would, and it was a picture of a guy with a microphone proudly singing over his song. Oh, you had one of those?
Well, I had Denon made a karaoke machine. I used to do weddings a long time ago. And so having a karaoke machine in your rack was pretty useful. Anytime someone said, hey, let's do karaoke, you could just push any CD into it and it would remove the center track. I mean, basically it just nulled them to each other. But they
was doing the phase thing with the stereo. It just took the center channel out and off it went. But we've really come quite a ways from those days.
Yeah, it's a long way. Go ahead, George.
And it's getting even more amazing because Serato, I just happened to see a video demonstrating the newest Serato, which is the DJ, the preeminent DJ app that the pros really tend to use for live DJs and DJing events. And it now can load in tracks, do the separation directly in the app, and give the DJ instant access to lead guitar, lead instruments, drums, bass, and vocals, and on the fly choose what they want to hear in a mix. And I watched a guy take 5 songs, do a 5-song live mashup, and do this. And yeah, it's not perfect, but exactly in the context of a mix, man, this is definitely next level. All the best shows, the DJs will definitely be doing this, and it's pretty darn amazing.
Yeah, it was before I did weddings, I did raves, and so the weddings make way more money. But with raves, there was a thing called Progen, which was by the Shaman, and they had basically exported. They literally just sent out all their tracks. So all the tracks for a song called "Move Any Mountain" was all gave us. We had 3 vinyls that had all the tracks on them. And we could remix those, and it was gold. And they blew up all over everything because we could play the separations, and basically we could hint to the song coming up. So you could be playing like things and remix it into other things that you were doing. And all you had to do is, now, beat mixing is nothing, so, but you just draw it all in there, and you can just hear it coming and then build up to it. And now you can do that with Serato, I guess. You can do it with anything. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there's it's quite interesting. Since those original Beatles, the Revolver track was recorded on a 4-track, they bounced a lot of stuff. And there's a good article in Analog Planet on the demixing with interview with Giles Martin, of course, George Martin's son, who did supervised it. And apparently they used some software from Weta Research and from the famed producer down there who does all those movies about short people, to take apart the sound and use the artificial intelligence to demix the different tracks.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, Peter Jackson use a lot of the tools that are a lot of the tools that we've been using for effects or other things to really bring back history. Basically, they had the World War I basically documentary reframed everything and fixed all of the frame issues that people had with the movies. The Beatles obviously broke some of that stuff down as well. It's just a really fascinating way, because that's what I get excited about, is that it's not just about how to do new entertainment, but it's how to re-understand a lot of things around us. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, years ago on this panel, I said the first rule of audio mixing is that you can't unmix audio. And here I am eating my words. Serato, last time I saw it, blew my mind. I used Serato very heavily when I was mixing. And then I'm going to be thinking about Move Any Mountain. Thank you, Alex, for the rest of the day, because yes, I did a whole bunch of mixing with that. Never got into the vinyl part of it, but the most recent versions, even if you're controlling it with a MIDI, like you don't even need decks. It is spectacular.
Yeah. I mean, for us, a lot of times we were throwing those samples, onto a EMU Emacs for when I was doing it. So you'd have all the samples. Yeah, we'd have all the samples sitting there. So I'd have them. I had mine taped, so I'd have it taped across, and I could sit there and hit those things because I didn't want to use up. I had to sample all the records because I didn't want to use up my MK1200s for the samples.
Oh, man, that's a flashback, because my cousin had Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes on his EMU. And the whole song was broken out on the keyboard.
Nice.
They had so much fun with that. That was the coolest thing.
Oh, absolutely. That'd be a good one to, well, I mean, and the things to think about, I mean, people have been doing this for a while, and these production level versions are getting to a whole, other level. But if you listen to there's Pressure, is up there showing someone separated the vocals. I don't know if they got the tracks or they separated them out, because it happened quite some time ago, but it was astounding. Most of the time when you separate the vocals, you're like, wow, that didn't sound very good. But Pressure is not one of those. So anyway, listen for audio isolation if you do audio or vocals isolated in YouTube, you'll get a whole bunch of things that people are using AI, and sometimes they have access to the tracks, but a lot of AI to do that. Next question.
And Ray Franklin from Mount Dora in Florida writes, would the new Sony SV1F work in a desktop teleprompter for Zoom? It has HDMI out to ATEM. Is it a replacement for Brio?
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't think it's a replacement per se, but it's got a lot of good features, and certainly it would work. I mean, anything you can get an HDMI signal out of, put behind a teleprompter, will work. There are a couple of things I noticed that were a little odd choices for Sony to have made for me. Number one, it's a 4:3 native sensor, so you're going to be windowing it a little bit to get a 16:9 out of it. It's got plenty of resolution, though, so that shouldn't be a big problem in terms of the quality of the signal out. The other thing I noticed was that it's a fixed lens, and the widest it'll go is 24 millimeters. That will probably work for most of these kind of desktop applications where you've got a camera behind a teleprompter, but you're not going to be able to go any wider than that. So just be aware of that for the geometry that you're working with. If you can get a little depth between your camera and your position in front of it, you should be fine.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Sony's been releasing a lot of cameras in that range. Its predecessor is the ZVE-10. It does have a removable lens, which would make it a little more appropriate if you wanted to use a prime on your prompter. But as you can see from the size of it, it would probably fit into most of the teleprompters out there because it doesn't require a lot of depth. It's not like an FX6 or an FX9 or something else along those lines. So I think it's certainly, it's really not quite in the same category as the Brio. The Brio is a different kind of a camera. The ZV series is more of a mirrorless camera in terms of its look and feel and depth of field and all the lenses you can put on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at $778, I would expect a larger sensor, and the record is not great. It's not like a uncompressed raw record, and so I think that it puts it into a little box. So I think it's a little overpriced for that. There's some of the other Sonys that are less expensive that I'd probably go with if I was going to that do have larger sensors, in some cases full frame sensors, and so I would probably look at those. I think that it has a good use. I don't know if the teleprompter is where I'd put it. As far as a replacement, my replacement is this Insta360 link for the Brio, and we spent a lot of time. I've tested almost every camera under $300 or $400 for webcams, and that's the one. Next question.
And David Brady from New York says, does anyone have an opinion, experience, or exposure to the innovative Deploy? I'm looking for a buy once, cry once cart for a mobile rig, and this looks promising, albeit expensive, but I'm worth it, right? And he has a URL.
Go ahead, Jeff.
David Brady, you are worth it. Boy, I took a look at this. I've never used it, but boy, I took a look at it. This is an amazing, amazing cart. Heavy duty, looks like it will roll over anything. It separates so you can take the two halves of the rack to get it in and out of a smaller trunk. But boy, yes, it is expensive, but you are worth it, David Brady.
You're definitely worth it, David. So just treat yourself. It looks great. It looks like some carts that I've seen on set. So I don't know if this is the one, but it definitely looks similar to a bunch of carts that I've seen for DITs in the past. And they have been very useful, and it looks like it packs up to a pretty small footprint. So it looks great. The big wheels on the sides are more important than people think. So getting over curbs, bumps, stairs, so on and so forth, it makes a big difference to have those larger wheels on there with the handles. And so anyway, it looks. Next question.
And Paul Volhus from Austin, Texas writes, is there a good program like Remote PC or TeamViewer that will take control of an iPad, Apple Watch, or iPhone 14?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, now I'm not sure about anything out there that can just take control of it without the owner of that device first authorizing it. But I use TeamViewer. I've been using TeamViewer for years. It's great. In terms of computers, for example, you can set it up so that you can, if it's set up ahead of time, you can take control of another computer. The other thing I love just from a computer standpoint is for someone that you've never helped before, they don't need to do a full install of the program. There's a quick support module that they can just get, download, and run. You can email them a link. They can run it, and now you're able for that session to help them. They have that same module for iOS. So TeamViewer Quick Support is the app from the App Store, at least for iPhones and iPads. Again, the user gets that, they run it, and now you're able to connect and help them. You can see the iOS device, and you can push a whole bunch, read the description on the website. You can push a whole bunch of different settings. You can't just tap on it like you would if you're holding it, but you can do a whole lot. I've never heard of anything for the Apple Watch, but bear in mind, you can do a lot on the Apple Watch from the Apple Watch app on their iPhone, assuming they have both. So now that you have access to see and help them with, let's say, their iPhone by way of that Apple Watch app, you can also help them with their Apple Watch.
Yeah. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, what he said.
Go ahead, Jason.
You can remote control the Apple Watch through iOS, through the most recent version of iOS. Attended, this is much easier because this can be done through Apple's own MDM as well as directly through a FaceTime call. You can just share your screen and give up control, and that works pretty well.
And Apple has built most of these so that you can't use an external app to control what they're doing as from a security perspective. Next question.
And Jeff Cohen from Miami Beach, Florida writes, aside from using a dynamic mic, how does live radio manage to eliminate virtually all mouth sounds, clicks, breaths, etc.?
Javier?
Well, before going to hardware or software, I tried to fix it in wetware. So most of it is like the person speaking being correctly hydrated. That avoids a lot of the mouth clicks and a lot of the noises when you're speaking.
And I'm just wondering, how they do it in their chain. Of course, we have all the grandma's tips.
Yeah. So that's the thing I do. Maybe someone has like a more hardware software approach.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so I've just been fascinated, trying to dial in my own sound and make sure, especially none of those things end up in production and recordings, and spending all the manual time, especially that things that software doesn't automatically get out. And then, of course, especially if you see, some radio shows that are on YouTube, they're just eating the mic. Of course, they're using a dynamic mic. They're touching the foam, and you don't hear a breath, anything. And what's more fascinating, I've seen some that will give you a behind the scenes when they're on commercials, and sometimes they're switching the audio source to maybe the mics on cameras, and now you hear everything. You hear the room, you hear everything else. I'm just fascinated by what they're doing live, real time, through a combination of hardware, software chain.
Go ahead, Mitch.
And not much software in the radio business. It would be a big foam windscreen, which is annoying because it smells bad. That cuts down some of the plosives. The other thing is that radio people generally have an inline mic processor that preamps and effectively adds compression and limiting. That's just a big thing with radio people. So there might be a little bit of expansion going on. And then the third part is that radio people know how to talk without popping and clicking and a lot of breaths. We just learned a technique for trying to avoid that.
Go, George.
I think it's more to it than that. And the thing about mouth clicks specifically, I'm not going to talk about breaths because that's all technique, but mouth clicks are mechanical. And it's like a harpsichord, right? There's no dynamics with mouth clicks. It's just mechanical. You open and close your mouth. The click sounds, which I'm doing a little bit right now, are there, right? But the more you project your voice, the louder your voice signal is compared to the mouth noise. So on-air announcers and DJs tend to project mostly pretty loud. They put a lot of energy in. They're projecting, it's high energy, and so their voice is considerably louder than the mouth noise, I think But on the other side of that, conversely, I'll listen to an NPR show, a story, This American Life, an interview or whatever, and I'll hear incredible amounts of mouth noise from the guests that they're interviewing, because I'm pretty sure they're using very sensitive condenser mics that pick that up very nicely, like U87s. So, it depends on what you're listening to, the programming, and who's producing it. And sometimes mouth noise is extremely prominent, but mostly the live stuff I hear, I don't hear it because of that. They have technique and they're projecting quite loudly.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, George covered it really very well. It has to do with the amount of energy generated by the mouth clicks versus your voice and mic placement. And, of course, type of microphone. With a dynamic microphone, it has a moving coil attached to that diaphragm, so there's much more mass that the sound pressure waves have to move. So little tiny sounds like mouth clicks aren't going to have enough energy to move that dynamic microphone coil enough to generate a sound to hear. So that's why, a dynamic mic works better to eliminate those things. And also mic placement. With a condenser mic that just has a very thin plastic mylar diaphragm, gold sputtered diaphragm, it's very sensitive, and people who like to work the proximity effect move in too close, and that's where you're going to start to hear the mouth clicks and mouth noises, because they make it the distance to the microphone.
You good, Bill?
On the performance side, just realize if you don't have a good feedback loop, which means a good set of headphones turned up loud enough to hear what you're doing, for most of us who've been doing voiceover for a long, long time, it was being in a booth with headphones on, turned up. We'd go to edit something, we'd realize we were doing it, and then we'd become aware of it, and then you'd start working out these tiny micro techniques to try to suppress those kinds of things because you knew you were doing it. So the feedback loop for you as learning to be an announcer or a voice talent, I think, is one of the most critical stages. Learn to hear that, and then learn to moderate some of your behavior.
While I don't use it very much, when I was in radio, we had hardware gates. So that took out a lot of things. And as long as you were constant and didn't let your own voice drop down below that gate, and that the gate was set well and not aggressively on the attack, you didn't notice it at all, but it just sucked everything out of all your breaths and everything else out of the system. Next question.
Excuse me. Douglas Carmichael writes, Connections Museum in Seattle has done an exceptional job preserving the history of the U.S. telephone systems, as shown here, and he lists a YouTube link. Are there any museums preserving the technology in our industry?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Unfortunately, it's currently closed since COVID, but the Living Computer Museum, also in Seattle, is pretty awesome. It does have a lot of online resources, so I'll post a link in Mukana.
Good, Bill.
And if you're interested specifically in the broadcast technology, there are 3 or 4 broadcast technology museums around the country. There's one in Texas. I think there's one in California. So just do a search on Broadcast Technology Museum, and you should find some alternatives there for that stuff.
I think one of the biggest ones, or the one that has the most gear, I don't know if it's very large, is in West Virginia. I think it's about a couple hours out of Cincinnati, so I think that is another one there. We should find a way that these would be great second hours, with 2 people and asking questions and so on and so forth. So we should try to find how to go to some of these museums. It'd be a lot of fun. Next question.
And Colin Mulcahy from Dublin, Ireland writes, anyone had a chance to read up on Rode's new sub-brand launched today? It's Rode X, and that's spelled R-O-D-E-X.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the new Rode X is part of the new genre of microphones that are coming out. I think Logitech has one too. What they're doing is they're putting DSP in the microphone itself. And then you have a software piece that runs on the computer that the USB is plugged into. And that software in itself has other features. Rode is talking up the fact that they have Aphex on the processing on the microphone. So I'm sure that'll appeal to some of our friends that are Aphex fans out there. But I'm not sure that I like the idea of having to have a piece of software talk to the microphone. I'm more of a discrete person, microphone, computer, whatever else. So I'm kind of put off by it. But I looked at it, and their virtual program is pretty interesting. But again, all special effects.
Go, Bill.
In the sales world, we used to call this a bundle. Rode is taking their technology, which has been proven, been around a long time, and they are bundling together a bunch of equipment so that you get a turnkey solution. The advantage of that is everything works together, and it's probably pretty simple. There's no confusion of having to take one kind of signal and turn it into another kind of signal. I'm sure this bundle is made so everything works together. The downside to bundles in general is that you're stuck with this one company's offerings, which can be fine, but you don't have much ability to switch it out. Now, in this particular case, they have a USB solution. They also have an XLR solution. So in terms of microphones, if you don't particularly like the sound of their microphone or it doesn't seem to work for you, you can add in other XLR microphones. So that's good. But generally, I think these are excellent for starters who don't have a lot of experience with these things. Generally, as you move up, you tend to want to have more control over things. So you generally move out of these systems pretty early. But if you're starting out in the business, I think they can be a good solution to take all the confusion out of it and just get something that works right away.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I mean, this one is so new, I haven't even heard of it. In fact, I can't even find it on Google with a quick search. But the one that's been around for a while that I think is incredibly hard to beat is the PreSonus Revelator. Fender bought PreSonus and put that up on their site for $99, and you're buying a $99 multi-pattern condenser microphone with an built-in mixer that has 2 virtual loopback channels that you can create your production mixes. I mean, it's insane value for what you can get out of one microphone. Is that perfect for everybody? No, but if you've got a very portable, or if you want to have something you throw in your bag with your laptop and a webcam and you want to be ultra portable, or you just don't have a lot of space or budget, I'm using the Revelator hardware box without the mic, and I'm very happy with its mixer. To have that built directly into the microphone and then have an iPad or something to control the mixer is an incredible feature set, and the quality is really where you need to be for most anything live streaming.
Uses the same mixer software that the external.
You're new, but once we lock it, it'll lock it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and repeat that. It looks like they've taken the algorithms from the Rodecaster Pro 2, so that you have all those wonderful Aphex, devices to enhance your audio, only building it into the mic. They also have the software Unify. This is really targeted at gamers. It's a gamer mic. It's designed so that they can create virtual channels and unify them. So it performs a lot of the functions like loopback and hijack, only maybe on the Windows platform or maybe cross-platform, so that the interface is the same. So you can mix, I think, up to 4 virtual channels or different channels within your computer. And six virtual audio channels, it says, including game chat, browser sounds, game sounds, etc. So it's really aimed at gamers.
And for our producers, we have a lot of questions coming in. So definitely jump into the voting. Make sure that you order these in the way you'd like to get to them. I don't know if we're going to get to all of them by the end of the hour. You might have to save some for next Wednesday when we bring them and have another audio discussion. But we'll move through them as best we can. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida says, are there any USB mics that approach the quality of an XLR mic and interface? Premix 3 is out of the budget range.
Go ahead, Serge.
I'm using a Samsung Q2U, and that microphone has both XLR and USB. As a very cheap solution, I think it's a great microphone, and nobody complain about my sound.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Depends on what you're using that microphone for. If you're using it maybe for sound and noise reduction, like what the Mix Pre 3 gets you with Noise Assist, no. The answer is no. There are no USB mics that can do that. But I think they're quickly heading in that direction by adding DSP to the mic. But again, there are too many opportunities to abuse that those adjustments on the computer side. I'd rather have the mic have a certain character that does a certain job and puts enough volume out to work properly.
Go ahead, George.
Just because I like to point out things that people don't know about yet, the Tula mic, Tula, has Bruce-free noise reduction internally in the USB mic, where you hold a button down to measure the room tone, and then it makes a noise print and then applies that to the audio all in real time, all inside a microphone that costs $200, and it can record internally. So there's some new stuff coming out all the time that's really fascinating in this area. Would I say it approaches the quality of an XLR mic? I would say yes. The big thing that most USB mics are lacking tend to be just they cheese out on something. It's usually the preamp. Their self noise tends to be higher. But if you really got to go USB, you can check out USB mics from Antelope. The Edge series are quite amazing, and there's also a USB mic from, believe it or not, Sennheiser, called the MK4 Digital. They don't like to use the word USB. We don't do that around Sennheiser, but it is a USB mic, and it's a $400 plus USB mic. I wouldn't buy one. Why would I spend that much on a USB mic when I have everything else? But if that's what you're looking for, that's highly high-end pro mic that's USB.
Yeah, we tried to find a cost-effective one that we could use for Michael Krasny's show, and we, after testing they were all about less than $300. We tested probably 8 mics, and we're still stuck with the MV7, which isn't perfect, but it's still, we found that its overall solution as a USB mic from, easy to set up, easy to use, produces a good sound, USB. We found that it kind of checked off all the marks that we
just
needed.
Knows how to hit the sweet spot on that. They also have the MVI, which is a really great little USB mic as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes to us and says, Starlink can now be used on, quote, any moving land object, unquote, with their new flat dish. And he has a link. Could in-motion Starlink open up new possibilities for production that couldn't be done with traditional satellite technologies?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, this new dish, it's out in December. It's quite a bit more expensive than the normal dish. I think it's $2,500 for this one. I think in motion, the real innovation will come when they're releasing next year. Is it for aviation? So that's so for planes basically. So doing kind of live broadcasts from within a plane would be the real kind of I think a big or new move that the new Starlink can do. But I think the issue with the ground moving vehicle, this dish is a lot more, doesn't need as much of a window in the sky as the present Starlinks do. So it'll be interesting to see how well that works on a moving vehicle, because trees and things like that are you need quite a big hole in the clear view of the sky for the present one to work. So it'll be interesting to see how this one works moving.
Serge?
And remember that Starlink, with all the testing we have done, it's not still a production link. LTE will be a better, or 4G or 5G will be a better solution if you want to have production. And also the fact that the RV solution, the fact that you are moving, you're in the lowest priority with Starlink. It's not giving you the same speed as a fixed point.
Yeah, but when in a push, I definitely don't think I would use it in production yet. I have one, and it's a little tweaky. so I at least the first version is, and the second version may be a lot better. The fastest vehicle that I've heard that the Starlink works on is about 400 miles an hour. Next question.
And Ryan Perea from Orlando, Florida writes, what are the current recommendations for headset mic options, USB or wireless?
Go ahead, Stefan. Oh, Stefan, did you?
Pardon?
Oh, are you there?
He was frozen earlier.
You're frozen there for a second. Go ahead.
Okay. It depends on the use case. I would recommend USB over wireless for anything in broad.
We're having some connection issues there, Stefan. You're breaking up a little bit.
Case in point.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. You got your little breakup there on your end. And in the past, we haven't used as many headset mics recently. So during COVID, we definitely used the Piles and the Polsons as USB mics. They are a little thin, and they never got the length quite right. Especially the Biles came out and they just were really long. And so it really became a challenge, to make a lot of that work. Go ahead, George, real quick.
Yeah, it totally depends on the context. In the gaming space, there are definitely some much better sounding headset worn mics nowadays, but I don't know if that's what you want to see on camera. And then Sennheiser is definitely known for some of the best head-worn headset microphones. So it depends if it's just a head-worn mic or if it's a headset with a headphone. There's so many subgenres here to talk about. But yeah, it's a good question. There should be like a really nice sounding, just small head-worn that's plugged in USB. And it's a good question. There really doesn't seem to exist that exact product. And I would buy it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a product in the $150 to $200 range that was USB, that was a headset, I think would be a big market, like a low profile headset. They've kind of figured that out. The ones that we use are not that. They're either Countryman or DPAs are the ones that we've typically used as a low profile, high quality mic. But those are still in the $450 and above range to make those work. Next question.
And James Hutchison from Dublin, Ireland says, can the group recommend a reasonably priced mic for Zoom that can be placed on a conference table via a USB connection?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Shure MV7. It's been extensively tested here in office hours, and we approve. But the mic that George just mentioned, that Tula mic I've been reading up here on their website, looks very interesting. I think I'm going to buy one.
Good, Bill.
I'm assuming that you're looking for a mic for one person sitting at the conference table. The other thing that conference tables often do is try to do a mic in the center for a roundtable discussion. That is extremely problematic. We used to use these things called PZMs, pressure zone modulation mics, to do that. It never worked particularly well. Some of the telephone people have different kinds of things that try to do very complicated noise canceling to make that work. But if that's your situation, be careful and test before you rely on that for an audio signal recording.
Go ahead, George.
Quickly, check out MXL. MXL does make a USB tabletop conference mic that's low profile. Check that out.
I've owned a couple of those, and they work as well as any other tabletop mic. So I don't think I haven't found ones that worked better, but they all are a little roomy. Next question.
And this is from Harold Delosier in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. I'm recording concerts in a high school with a single camera. What microphone do you suggest for audio of groups on stage? One mic only, and placement is about 15 feet from the front of the stage.
Good, Jason.
I've got to start by saying I strongly suggest that you try to do this with more than one microphone. Just because you only have one camera doesn't mean you can't just plug in a quick multi-track recorder. But yeah, I would say a boundary mic, if possible, if you can float it and isolate it sufficiently. And I'm out of mic, so that's kind of about it.
Yep. Go ahead, Jeff.
So you don't tell us what type of concerts you're recording. I'm assuming this is school wind bands and things. I would probably get sort of a Zoom recorder, not the Zoom audio recorders that have an XY mic in them, and put that up as high as you can get it. So a tall stand sort of 10 feet above the stage.
Go ahead, Javier.
And if you can only put one mic, I could try an Ambio mic that you have, can do like binaural audio. So maybe give you a different perspective just using one mic.
Next question.
George Whittam from Venice, California says, is it me or is Adobe sunsetting development of Audition? V23 was just released with only a handful of bug fixes and not a single new feature.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, George, I think it's hard to improve on perfection. Adobe's Audition program is tightly integrated with all their other products. So I think that it would be very unfortunate if they were to do something like that.
Go ahead. Next question.
Hector Rodriguez in Washington, D.C. says Coldplay is live broadcasting to movie theaters from Argentina Friday and Saturday. Anyone from the panel planning on attending? And they have coldplaycinema.live as the website.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm not going to be able to go to this one, but I went to what seems to be a similar one earlier with Brandy Carlisle in the local movie theater. The sound quality was good on the big Cinerama-style screen. It was a really pretty thing to watch, and I would go back to another concert. I didn't know this one was happening, but everything worked smoothly for the last one I went to.
And next question.
Ed Reynolds from North Adams, Massachusetts says, what is the complete explanation for what the, quote, reference, unquote, SDI is or does on a DeckLink Duo?
Go ahead, Jason.
It does tri-sync blackburst. So generally, you'll have a lot of different references coming into a switcher. And if it needs to be mixed, switched, or luma keyed, it needs to be synchronized. That's basically what the tri-sync does, so that the beginning of every pixel of every frame begins at within a few milliseconds of exactly the same time.
Go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, Jason explained it pretty well. It's synchronization signals, vertical and horizontal sync. If it's using analog, which is blackburst, or tri-level, which is a digital input from SDI. And sometimes it will also, I think it will also accept embedded time code if it is embedded in the SDI signal.
Next question.
John Merrill from Phoenix, Arizona says, what iPhone camera laptop mount have you been using or recommend for continuity camera on a Mac?
I think that there's a bunch of people making them right now that are building them, but I don't know if there's any solid ones right now. There's a lot of ones that will do what you're looking for is a quarter 20 that goes to a mount. I'm using the Peak Design, so I have this Peak Design phone mount, and then I have this little square, and it's a magnet and a square, and it'll lock into it. So I can use that mount and leave it up there and just simply snap my camera, up to it. So that's a pretty effective solution there. Next question.
Andre and DeWill from Berlin says, I want to connect a BM Studio Camera 4K Pro with an ATEM Extreme HDMI and get the camera control. What is the exact cabling setup with two BM BIDI converters?
Go ahead, Jason.
Do you really need the BIDI converters? Okay, so you basically just go from HDMI to SDI, match them and reverse them, and then go back to HDMI. But you can plug HDMI directly in.
Actually, the studio camera 4K, I believe, is SDI only, but you should be able to.
No, it has an HDMI. I assure you,
the
works.
new one or the old one?
The new one.
So it depends on which one you're using. So if you're using the old one, then you would need this. You wouldn't have an HDMI. I'm assuming that Andre's asking because there's no HDMI in it. So that would be the old one there. And I think you only need one of them. I think it's two SDIs. And so I think all you need is to go HDMI out of the switcher into the bidirectional converter, and then do the two SDIs into the camera. But that's for the older BM. As Jason said, the newer one will have HDMI. Next question. Oh, can't hear you, Lois.
Lois Richter from Davis, California, that's me, ask, is there an app that can locate the ums in a radio interview so that I can consider removing them?
Go ahead, George.
Well, the newest thing, and this is probably why you haven't seen a lot of new things from Adobe in the audio world, is because they have a skunk works, and it's called Project Shasta. And they have it. You can go to podcast.adobe.com and start playing around with it. And it's a completely AI-powered audio recording, editing, all in the web. So it does that stuff and a lot more. It's frighteningly amazing. So I'm not saying I have a plug-in idea for you that will just work in your current workflow. This is Adobe saying, we're just going to invent the whole workflow for you and do it for you. And check the demo and be shocked.
Good, Ken, real quick.
Yeah, there's a program called Descript. It removes not just ums, but all those kind of pauses from. And I've used that quite successfully on to prove that from the video. I'll put a link in the chat.
Bill, real quick.
I'm gonna reserve judgment until I actually see it working, because it's so hard to tell the difference between and Monday, and it's just a process of they will refine and refine and refine. But like auto spell correct or like anything else or transcription, You can get to 99%, but that still means you have to look at every single thing through your program to make sure that you didn't get, you're not missing 99 to 100.
That's the problem with deep breathers too. They miss the breath or misidentify them all the time. Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep moving. Next question. Oh, next question.
Bart Gaffney in Wisconsin says, unable to do a lot of build out to sound deaden a space. Is there any inexpensive processing to tamp down excessive HVAC noise?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the quick answer is you want to reduce the velocity of the air. So larger vents work well. And also 90-degree turns allows sound to bounce around and lose its energy.
Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
That's doing construction, so it probably won't be inexpensive. The problem is that often HVAC noise has components down in the range of the lower end of human speech. So if you start messing with filtering to get rid of the HVAC, you can eat into the voice and cause it to be thinner or less robust than it might otherwise be. You can try your best, but still difficult.
Courtney?
Yeah, noise assist from Sound Devices, that is not cheap because it's an additional add-on to an expensive mixer. If you have a NVIDIA video card, an RTX card, there's something called NVIDIA RTX Voice. You can get that and download it and try that out. It's very good at noise removal of unwanted noise other than voices.
And we've such a stack, just so you know, we're going to go a little over, but we're going to try to answer a couple more of these relatively quickly. Go ahead, George.
I'll just drop this here. Waves Clarity VX and Clarity Pro are mind-boggling.
Go ahead, Lois.
And then there's always the off switch, and just turn it off when you're recording.
You have to be careful. Also, we did that, and we kind of semi-destroyed our AC unit because what we did is we connected it so that when we went on air, it automatically turned the AC off, and it was a hard stop to keep it from making noise, which worked really, really well, but it's really bad for the AC. So just keep that in mind. Next question.
Ike Potter from Hanover, Germany writes, the EcoFlow Delta. According to YouTube EEV Blog 2, switching input power from AC to solar and vice versa is not zero time, but has a lag of 10 ms. Is that a mission-critical argument in AV and network production?
Go ahead, Kenn.
Being an owner of the DeltaFlow Max, there is, because if you're running directly from the battery, it depends on what this YouTube video was doing with it. If you're running directly from battery power, so you're always getting constantly that. So, because I can have it plugged into AC and into solar, and it will just, that's feeding in, charging the battery. So if you should plug directly into the battery system. If you're talking about the Delta Pro, which is plugged into a house, then the switching from when it's you've got direct power or going from that would have that latency. But I would always think of plugging the equipment like in here directly into the battery, so you're always getting it from the battery directly, so there wouldn't be any failover.
Next question.
Paul Valhus asks, what is the topic on today's Web Lab breakout room? When is it? Who will be there?
Go ahead, Kenn.
Well, I'll be there, and hopefully you all too, Paul. Today it's going to be directly after office hours, and there's a number of questions, general questions I'll be answering, but also we'll be looking at Greg's website and how you would use Google AdWords to promote using Google AdWords and keywords. If you're building a promotion, I'll show you how that works.
Next question.
Ken Hampton from Greenville, Illinois writes, sending audio from Zoom to a Meeting Owl 360 conference camera connected via USB. How can I control the audio level sent that reaches the Owl speaker? The local controls on the Mac are disabled when connected, similar to using HDMI out.
Go ahead, George.
Go on Mac Update and download a no longer developed app called Line In. And try that. It's a really, really simple, basic app that lets you just take something in and send it back out, and then lets you can do things like control level. I don't know 100%, but it's something free and cheap and easy to test out.
Next question.
Courtney Goodin Excuse me. Courtney Goodin from Hollywood says, has anyone played with Unitune, Google's AI single image manipulator? Thoughts? And there is a link to a YouTube.
Courtney, have you played with it?
I just looked at it and watched the YouTube. It looks quite interesting. It kind of takes what DALL-E and the other AI-based image generators from tokenized text to an image, and you start with an existing image, and then you can expand it out or change people within the image. Change one person to a Cookie Monster or something just by using verbal descriptions, and it has a pretty good job of isolating people and changing them and editing them and doing things like you would do in Photoshop with masking,
right,
or extending with using AI.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. I find that, by the way, Midjourney is excellent for building blog post images where you can have some concept that it illustrates. We used it for MacBreak last week. Next question.
Lois Richter writes, when you remix someone else's song and then publish it, do you have copyright issues?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Short answer, yes. There's two copyrights in mind. There is the underlying musical work, and then there's also the particular sound recording. And you do have to get permission for that, though check if you're getting someone who's released tracks to allow you to remix. They may have a limited license or copyright permission along with that release.
Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
What Jeff said, and search on copyright derivative works. That'll help you.
Next question.
Srikanth Sri Ram from India says, how to convert XLR to AES or EBU to BNC with adding minimal gear.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the best way is an inline device. It's basically a transformer that takes the XLR impedance and matches it to the 75 ohm impedance of a coax. They look like an XLR connector, and you just put the XLR on one end and the coax on the other. Sescom has them, and there's a number of other manufacturers.
Pix 240. So good at that. Anyway, next question. Oh, Jeff. Sorry, Jeff, real quick.
If the XLR is AES EBU already, then that's all you need. But if the XLR is an analog line level, you're going to need an A to D converter to convert to AES EBU.
Next question. Oh, can't hear you.
Sorry. Brett from Appleton, Wisconsin says, does anyone know the retail price for the Sony A7RV camera that was just announced? Pre-orders start 10/27.
According to B&H, it is $38.98. 61 megapixels, takes 120 frame for 1080p. Looks pretty good. I don't know how much of a difference it is from the 4, so we'll have to maybe dig into that a little bit more. Next question.
Colin Mulcahy from Dublin, Ireland writes, heads up for anyone interested in the Rode NTH100 over-ear headset. There is a major weakness or flaw in the plastic clip that secures the headband to the ear cup. We've returned 3 new sets that have very easily broken at the same place.
Interesting. Is this, I don't think I know this one. This is not a over the ear that I think that I'm familiar with. Oh, it's like an over the ear. Yeah. I wouldn't know anything about those. So anyway, all right. We are now changing subjects a little bit late and going into our Ruthless review. Really just, one of the things that we're going to talk about here is just the idea is to continually maximize what kind of quality we can get out of Zoom, out of what we're doing here, and working with our mics, working with the environment around us. A lot of us have changed mics, moved things around. We'll do this in video soon as well, probably next week. And the goal is to, as we get version, Office Hours 2.5 up to speed, we want to keep on trying to match what we can do with ISO with the quality of our audio and our video, for what we're delivering back to the system. It's also a good opportunity to learn a little bit from what we're doing and for us to learn from what we're doing. So those are the things that we're working on here. What we'll do first is if you have questions about what we're doing, go ahead and throw those questions in. But the way we do this kind of is to just kind of work through the system and have people give us feedback on it. And we'll try to keep it relatively quick because we do end up with a lot of questions oftentimes. And so we'll probably go about a minute or two per person. So we'll just have them talk a little bit, and then we'll have people just go ahead and I think we're just going to throw out feedback. I think we have to figure out a better way to do this because I have no way to really have that there. So I think people just have to kind of jump in, as we look at it here, or maybe just we'll make it old school and have everybody raise their physical hand and just let us know what you think of a specific person. So anyway, I'll go first since I'm just going to go through my list, and since I come first for me, I'm going to start there. So this is a Stellar X2. I copied Courtney, and I moved to this from a TLM 102, which was what I had before, Neumann, and I found that it for me it actually sounded better to me. So does anyone have any input on the quality of this audio?
Are you using original sound or no?
Oh, I'm not. Hold on.
Are you using noise assist? Because it's incredibly clean.
Yeah. So now this is with, I don't know if it changed very much.
No, the fidelity improved.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's I keep on forgetting I don't know if it's a feature that Zoom's doing or not. I consider it a bug that every time I change rooms, I go back to, it turns off the musician setting. So this, did you hear the difference?
You're a little bit lower in level too. So you might come
so I'll go a little bit. I don't know if it's a lot lower.
We went up to minus 28.
Okay, I can't do it while you're talking though. so I'm talking here, and you can see that the I mean I think that I'm probably in the same relatively range. I mean, we're trying to hit 24. So as I talk, I think that we're going to probably find that it may be a little lower, but it's not. It does look like it dropped 3 dB. As it worked through there. So, but it is so that there's a good lesson for us is to understand the difference. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm wondering if you could demonstrate that again and speak with original sound on and then switch it off.
Yeah, we are glad that Dauphin is so pleasant with us. His present annual pains we thank you for. We matched our rackets to these balls. We will in France, by God's grace, play a set shall strike his father's crown into the hazard. Tell him that he hath made a match with such a wrangler that all the courts in France shall be disturbed with chases, and we know how he comes o'er us with our wilder days, not measuring what use we did make of them. Could you hear me switching back and forth while I was talking?
Yeah, it took me a few cycles back and forth because the violent gain change is distracting. But the minute it comes back up, the fidelity, the timbre is like notably better.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
when
and
you
which
switch
was
it,
which?
Yeah, that was the problem. I was going to say you need to put your finger on when it's on and down when it's off, so we know which is which.
Okay, it's on right now. We are glad the Dauphin is so pleasant with us. His present annual pains we thank you for. When we have matched our rackets to these balls, we will in France, by God's grace, play a set shall strike his father's crown into the hazard. Tell him that he hath made a match with such a wrangler that all the courts in France shall be disturbed with chases, and we know how he comes o'er us with our wilder days, not measuring what use we did make of them. Did that now? And so when my hand was up, it was on, and when my hand was off, it was off. So go ahead, Mitch.
Big change in level, but also the stereo imaging for some reason changed from more mono with it off and less mono with it on. It's almost a phase thing that was going on. And the other problem is that when you switch original sound on or off on Zoom Live, it does weird things initially, and then it settles down.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
And I was hearing a little bit of change in timbre, almost like a tiny bit of compression added or something like that. It just popped a little more when you turned it off.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, because it's really trying to just get the most out of your mic. So it's going to, as an average, and when you don't have a great mic, it probably makes it a lot better. Anyway, so that's the mic that I'm using. We'll go to John Pretto.
I assert my Fifth Amendment privilege. I didn't come in on my Studio C. So next person.
Okay. Go ahead, Jeff.
Jeff Francis, Jeff Cohen.
Oh, sorry, Jeff Francis. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm on a Stellar X2, which is fairly new to me, and that goes into Symmetric's voice channel processor that's a mic preamp and might have a little bit of compression. And then I go analog out of that into the line input of an ATEM Mini Pro and doing a little bit of expansion and compression in there.
Yeah, go ahead, Serge.
I heard a little bit of background hiss or noise. I'm not sure if I'm the only one.
Good, George.
Overall, it's good. The only thing that stands out in the room is just the liveliness of the room. So just we call it the RT60. The decay of the reverb is a little bit more lively than we would normally want in a studio environment. So you could add some heavy-duty sound blankets off camera, flanking you, and knock that down quite a bit. That was the only thing I think. Otherwise, fidelity-wise and everything else, it sounded very pleasing.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the fidelity sounds good. I'm hearing a lot of the room, and if that is the mic that's peaking in the bottom of your frame, as it turned, as a side address mic, and if you have it a little bit below you and speaking across the top of it, you may get a little more of the room than if you had it angled up or sideways and in front of you more. So we're hearing a little more room, perhaps.
Yeah, and mine, I tend to wear dark shirts because it hides mine, but mine sits right to the side of me, and I speak across it, and it does seem to be pretty sensitive too. If I go forward like this, you'll hear my upper level, and as I pull back in, it's pretty sensitive to where it's pointed as it goes there. So you want to try it again, Jeff?
Yeah, so that's raised up. I had it down pretty low to keep it out of frame, so that's raised up there, and I'm trying to see how my level is looking. Still pretty low, so I probably need to come up level-wise.
And I would even get more aggressive. I'd move it over to one side a little bit and
this
get
is
closer.
With original sound on.
Yeah, I think it definitely sounds better when it's closer. Most mics do.
There's also some mechanical noise that we're picking up when you're doing something on your desk. So just be aware of that.
Adjusting it.
Another thing is, the more compression you use, the more that will exacerbate noise levels and reverb in the room. So more compression requires more expansion to counteract that and to try to reduce that negative effect of using compression. So that's a tricky part of using too much compression. But yeah, it's just a little lively. It's a very cheap fix with some sound blankets or moving pads, moving blankets, Fernie pads.
It's most of the approval of the household to put. I'm in a tent. So what you can't see for me is I've got sound. I got a sound blankets above me, to the side of me, to the in front of me. They're all. I'm like in a little tent because otherwise my room is super lively. But Jeff, you have a little bit of compression.
Yeah, it's pretty light, very little compression. But I've got some sound panels, at least on these front walls here, side of things.
It is proximity made a huge difference as you got closer. So definitely as you stop worrying about like just moving it up. And I think over COVID, I felt like we got past we don't need to have a clean frame.
A great place to put stuff's on the ceiling too. It won't bother your family as much. You can put a lot of stuff on the ceiling, and you'd be amazed at when you kill off the majority of the reflection of the ceiling, how much you can knock down the room reflection without adding more stuff in the frame.
And we're going to go ahead, instead of having people have to raise their hands, the team in the back end is starting to add people into the back end so you can see it there. So great, Jeff. Yeah, it sounds good. I think it's a good mic, obviously. So let's go to the next. Let's go to Jeff Cohen. Jeff, why don't you talk a little bit?
Great. Okay. So this is a MKH 416, and this is my vocal booth. This is a MKH 416 going into an Audient Evo 8 interface right into my Mac. And the other fascinating thing I want to try real quick also, George blew my mind the other day by saying he was helping another client and said that potentially having the door open might even be better in terms of, if I understood, removing some of that boxiness. But this is what it sounds like with the door closed in my vocal booth.
The original sound off.
Original sound off.
Now turn it on.
This is original sound on. And with that, I'm not doing anything. So I do not have high fidelity music mode, not doing echo, not doing stereo.
And I would do the high fidelity music mode. I mean, I wouldn't do the stereo, but I would probably turn that on. I'm not even sure what original sound does when it doesn't have that on.
Okay, and this is original sound on with high fidelity music mode enabled. Did you hear any difference even between those two, original sound on?
Yeah, it sounds a little less muffled. So the original sound on to me sounded just a little muffled in that. Yeah, so that was the only thing I would say. So I think it sounds better with the original sound on. Definitely sounds better. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm hearing a little more low end on the original sound off than on original sound on. So that's interesting to see that maybe we're just hearing, because we're hearing more detail on the high end with original sound on. It sounds.
I think that's the issue, is that when original sound's on, we're hearing more of the detail in the high end. Is what makes it sound
well,
better.
And it is changing the levels. When I did testing the other day, I have not added it back in, but it dropped me by about 4 dB. So this is original sound on, so I'm a little bit lower than with it off.
Right.
I don't know if that's.
I mean, if you have a tuned studio, the only time I have original sound off with a studio and a studio mic is when I forget that Zoom's going to turn it off for me. so it's like usually I'll keep it on. Otherwise,
and in terms of any background noise, ambient sound with original sound on,
not hearing it.
Yeah, it sounds pretty darn clean, Jeff. I mean, there's a certain point where we get so obsessed as voiceover about noise floor levels, and the thing about noise is if it's not distracting, it's not a problem. And that sounds very subjective, but if you look at a meter can show minus 40 dB noise floor and you don't really notice it in your ears because it's all rumble, or it could show minus 60 dB noise floor, but it's white noise, so it's very audible, right? So it just depends on the kind of noise, but yeah, I'm not hearing anything distracting at all.
You good, Bill?
There's two things. First of all, I'm hearing the boxiness you're a little bit worried about. And in my voice booth, I had to actually do a few things. First of all, I put in some shelves. I put in a little standing unit that my computer sits on. I tried to put things in there to break up just the fact that it was 6 parallel walls. That really helped a good little bit. And then my mic placement turned out to be absolutely mission critical. I had moved my mic into a corner at one point, and I noticed how much different I sounded on mic. So I actually did a set of experiments and just moved the mic into a variety of places. And I found one where I thought there was less of those close sort of boxy reflections. So you might want to do a little testing there and see. Record a lot, move your mic, record more, and then listen back to it and see what the difference it makes.
And this is in the middle of the room now. Now, blow my mind. Now I have opened the door to my booth, so I'm still here, but the door is opened. Original sound on. Anyone hear a
the
difference?
Boxiness is diminished, but my concern for you is: are you in a quiet enough neighborhood? Because with the door closed, you have that room within a room isolation. So if you have weather or traffic or things like that, you may not be able to get by with an open door, depending on your circumstances.
Right. But as far as right now, with no sirens or anything else, the boxiness has diminished a bit,
Yeah.
sounds like.
Yeah.
And no
Exactly.
additional just background noise or ambient noise?
No,
Yeah, I think it sounds marginally better, and it sounds real good.
Wow.
And the only thing I would be concerned about, again, if you're just going to record when you want to record, it's fine. If you're working for clients and they call it 2:00 and they say, I need this by 2:30, and that's when the traffic happens to be bad, that's really when a voice booth that you can seal off becomes mission critical for doing your work.
We call it quiet on demand.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
you need quiet on demand, that's where the money goes up dramatically, and you better hope that the gigs are paying better too.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you got to remember that 416 is a great mic, and Bill's using one. It's a very directional mic. It's a hypercardioid, and it achieves that directionality through what's called an interference tube, which means it's got vents along one side of it. And that's why it's very sensitive to reflections in a room, because it uses that phase differential to generate its directionality. And so that's why if you have a lot of indoors with a lot of reflective surfaces, it can sound a little bit weird because things arrive out of phase and cause a little phasing. And I always find that a 416 sounds better underneath. because it's so directional. If you're overhead, a lot of your sound comes out your nostrils. People don't realize that, but the resonance within your head comes out your nostrils. And if you're overhead, you don't hear that resonance. If you're underneath, you're hearing it. Bill, for example, is using the same microphone, and he's got his mounted underneath as opposed to overhead. So I think you'll have a little fuller sound if you like more bass resonance from underneath. Also, your body helps block the reflections into those noise-canceling vents on the side of the microphone if it's underneath, as opposed to being up in the middle of all the reflective area of the room.
If it's pointing down toward you, the sweet spot of the mic is pointing at your chest, which is actually where a lot of the resonance actually comes from. So you might get more of that and a little bit less of the nasality that you don't want. So there's definitely a lot of experimentation. I learned the above pointing down technique from Scott Rummel. He's been doing it that way for 25 years. And I tend to recommend that. But the 416 off axis is real funky. Look at the polar pattern sometime and look at the way it reacts to sound off axis. And it looks like a sawtooth at different frequencies. And that's what it makes it sound real funky when the room isn't quite right.
And it's one of the things I've been actually counting on. One of the reasons why I wanted this, and it seems to have worked, is I'm using the exact angle of this mic and that polar pattern to make sure that any potential street noise, and for that matter, noise from the adjacent room, is in that dead spot. Now this is it's not pointing up, but it is under me, about the same
distance. It needs
distance.
to be pointed up to hear the others.
Right.
Coming in from underneath and pointed up your nostrils.
Right. Even this, does anyone hear a difference with this being under me? Less noise?
I actually think it's
You're on the edge of the pattern right where you are now. You're just on the edge.
And sorry, Alex, you said what?
It did sound better to me. It sounds more full than it was when it was up above, but I think we're getting less detail, and I think that's part of why. If you were able to turn it up, we'd be able to see whether we're getting that detail there. We'll try to come back if we have enough time. We're gonna run out of time if we go.
Let me just say, you guys saved me so much, especially when the summer comes back. I'm in Miami, and the fact that I can have my booth door open is amazing.
That's great. All right, next question. Our next person is Kenn Jordan. Go ahead, Kenn.
Hi, this is Kenn Jordan speaking to a Harshid PR40 into the mix pre-6.2 into the M1 Mac, and original sound from musicians is off. I was actually wondering whether, not testing this mic, because I'm pretty okay with this one, is I have a NTG1 out of frame that I wanted to test for audio. And if I could do that, but I know there's a short time, so it might not be appropriate.
Turn it on.
Okay.
While you're doing that, this sounds very processed. It sounds very like Zoom is having its way with you. So let's hear that one.
This is the NTG1 off mic. Off, just out of frame. And I wanted to test how well this sounds. And again, original sound is off.
It's shouting.
Are we hearing both mics?
Let's try turning on original sound for most of these. It's because we're really trying to figure out the mic itself. So,
okay, make an adjustment. Make sure I'm not too loud. This is the NTG1 going into a mix pre-6.2 into the M1 Mac.
And are you able to switch back to the Heil?
Yes. And this is the Heil PR40.
Yeah, turn it up a little bit because it's lower.
Okay. Yeah. Again, this is the Heil PR40 into the mix pre-6.2 into the M1.
They each have pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
The PR40 sounds broadcast radio and podcast. The shotgun sounds video on camera television.
Mm-hmm.
They're just different.
Here you go, Jeff.
Do you have any processing going on, Ken? Because the Heil, I'm hearing a lot of like something I don't like in the sibilance up there. It's kind of almost got a smiley EQ to it. You've got a good round bass, but then you've got kind of harsh.
Yeah, there's no processing going on.
That's what the Heil PR40 sounds like.
That's why I don't like Heil mics.
Okay.
Our 30 is a little nicer.
I would still say that I would, choosing between the two, I would pick the Heil over the shotgun. I think that it just for our show, You know, people are going to.
This is just for this show. It would be this, but yeah, I wanted
the thing to think about
it.
is that our show is really. I mean, I really view our show as a radio show. Like when I am not on this show, I listen. We have an app that we're going to be pushing out to everyone in the next little bit of time. That is just a listen app for the show. So if I'm not on the show, I just listen to it through that app. And so I'm not really watching it. I'm just listening. And, you know, that's when I can really tell the difference between the mics. But I definitely want us to approach it as a radio show. You know, and I think that Heil might, from my experience of using the Heil, might sound better if it was a little bit like literally I have mine at a 45-degree angle and I go across it instead of going into it. And I prefer the sound that it generates with that over years or a decade of doing it. I kind of found that there's a real position that I want that to be in, to make that, to get that geometry makes a big difference for me anyway.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Alex. Like, I think the aesthetic of the audio the tastes have changed. And I think we've become so much more, because of the pandemic, we're all so much more accustomed to this, which is a mic close proximity, but still on camera. You know, when you subtract the video away, you really need to keep that audio up there, you know?
Yeah, I try to keep, one of the reasons that I keep my mic in frame is to plaster over and over and over again that it's okay to have the mic in the frame because it sounds better. Like it sounds better when the mic's when you have a good mic in the frame, it sounds better. And I want to be able to hear people clearly, and I like having I like meetings to be nice and radio-like. And I don't care about the mic. You know, like I don't care about seeing the mic, and I always want it to be there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, where I have my mic is a pretty extreme example of having the mic on frame, but I'm doing this because I'm teaching voice actors all day about mic technique and placement. So, but you know, if I was doing all on camera all the time, I would certainly probably have it down at the corner of the frame or underneath. Right. It would be more aesthetic.
Well, the one thing I found with the X2 is that I wear darker shirts, and it becomes something that most people don't notice.
It really does.
Especially when I wear a black shirt. I wear a lot of black shirts for sure, and it just fades into the thing. But
yeah, you didn't have a lot of silver shirts to hide the TLM 102, did you?
No, I didn't. I didn't have any matching shirts for the 102. All right, Jeff, did you want to add anything else? You already. I think I'm coming back to you. Let's go to the next question. Next person, Tom Ferguson. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, here I am on my Heil PR40, and I have the Mix Pre 6 with noise assist. Let's see, original sound is on.
Seems like a lot of sibilance. And I heard that with Kenn's as well.
Really? Okay.
Just a little bit when you were talking there.
Sarah sitting in the shoe shine shop?
Yeah, it's because of the reflectivity of the room. There's a brightness to the room. Mm-hmm. Literally, it sounds bright. And that it probably exacerbates that sibilant range. So same note I would give you as I gave Jeff Francis, just tamp down the room's liveliness a bit if you can, and that will calm that down.
And you're probably on the outer edge of that Heil as far as distance goes. So that Heil really in my opinion, wants to be about 3 inches away. And if it's closer than that, you get proximity, and you're further away than that, it starts picking up a lot of stuff around it. It's because of the off-axis rejection is so intense with that mic that 3 inches to me seems to be about just the right distance for that mic at a 45-degree angle.
So work it a little closer.
Yep.
Fist is a good gauge, a good fist distance. These dynamic mics have a very small sweet spot. So that's the challenge with them.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much noise assist is going on, because it sounds like quite a bit of
what do you have it set
processing.
I have it set to 10.
Turn it down just so people hear what the difference is with the noise assist and without, if you can, because I have a fair bit of noise assist going on as well. Mine's not quite as high as 10. I don't think. I think mine's at like 6.
I find a lot of these tools, obviously the more you use, the more they break down the sound a little bit, and there's like a point of diminishing return of quality, but 6 seems to be a sweet spot.
Yeah. It is 6 to 8 is probably the max that I usually take it to. If I turn, so you can hear mine now. that's what it sounds like until I turn it up to. I guess mine was turned to 8. This is 6. And that's 8. 8 is like pretty clean. But yeah, so anyway, so yeah, it's a pretty, I have to admit,
Yeah.
I went from not having noise assist to thinking that it was kind of a prerequisite to a lot of our stuff. If you're going to do something live, Jeff, were you going to add anything else? I think sometimes I'm going to you and then I come back and then we talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear how much noise assist there was and maybe hear a little bit less, because it was definitely stomping down on good things that we need to hear out of his voice.
Well, I'll look for it later. I was having trouble finding it in the menus.
Yeah, it's if you push in the channel button that you're talking into and then go to the second page, it should be in the middle there. But we'll come back to you if we have time, because we're gonna make sure we get to everyone before the end of the hour. The next question is from or next person is Bill Davis.
Hey there. I'm on my microphone, sitting at my desk, and I have just turned on original sound because it was not on there because the room can be heard. If I stay completely quiet and pop in and out of my mic mute, I don't know if you can hear much there, but some days the air conditioning is a little up and you get more room.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I like the sound of that, and it does make a difference. We can hear when you mute. And bear in mind, like I said earlier, the noise cancellation when you have original sound off doesn't have a chance to work very well if you're using a hardware mute that's outside of Zoom, and you're leaving Zoom unmuted all the time. Because when you unhardware mute, then it gives Zoom the first chance to hear what's coming in over your audio channel for its noise reduction. So
just so you can hear that, I have now turned original sound off, and I am using the mute the same way. So I'm going to click it back and forth and not speak.
Yeah, we still heard a little bit, but not as much.
Right.
It's actually what I don't like about that specific mute button, and why I don't use that one specifically, is because of that mechanical noise. I really feel like somebody needs to make a mute button. Even mine has a mechanical noise that I have to be careful with. That was a soft switch, and I've often thought of tearing apart the 205 and putting replacing the hard switch with a soft switch, so that you just didn't ever hear it, because there's a little bit of, but that one, because it's on all, you have the, which one do you have there? It's a little blue one.
The Rolls MS-111.
And it's it's an all metal body, and that smaller all metal body with that button tends to resonate, and I can hear it coming.
Yeah, one of the techniques I use is you'll often hear me go, and the next question, and what I'm trying to do is hit the mic button at exactly the moment I hit "and" for that, so I'm hiding the click under the first word I'm saying.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, the interesting thing is we even hear the mechanical button itself, not just
That's
you
what I was
drop it.
Okay, I understand that.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to avoid.
I can't overemphasize the little hidden gem that Zoom allows you to change and assign hotkeys. So if we're talking about Zoom specifically, you can assign a hotkey to toggle mute. I, for instance, chose whatever the very upper right function key is, I think F19 on a Mac keyboard. So I don't need to look. It is the very upper right. And I just always have my hand on that, much like you do, Bill. But to Courtney's point, it allows Zoom to keep listening, and it's toggle.
I will say that the reason that a lot of us don't use it is specifically because the number one reason people are not available, like when they go to start talking on our show over almost 1,000 episodes, has been the software mute for Zoom. so it's typically been a Stream Deck issue, and this is what I talked about earlier, is the tendency to double tap or non-tap because the travel in those keys is so low. And so the key travel is very low, and as a result, it's easy to double tap it, or it's easy to not actually get it to tap. And so it is. We've definitely but that's why some of us use mechanical ones, is because larger mechanical ones, is because It literally is the number one reason that we say I can't hear you. Someone's got a software, and I used to go after people on it. I've become nicer about it, but I used to be like, "Oh, you're using the software mute, aren't you?" So anyway, I've become nicer about it, but it's not as much of a deal because most of us don't do it as much anymore.
Does anybody have this Stream Deck? This is the little baby mini one.
Yeah,
it's my first ever.
I tried it for a week or so.
Yeah, okay, yeah. The travel seems decent on it, but yeah, nothing beats a mechanical switch like
They're magical. I mean, I use them a lot, and I use them especially in with Unity, as a Unity controller. So they're really good. It's just that's the one. I just have a trust issue when I'm in broadcast. I have a trust issue with it. I use it for a lot of other things, but anything mission critical, I usually take the Stream Deck out. so like it's like anything that's actually doing something that I'm going to see on air is where I stop using this. And then there's plenty of people that use it in production, and it's fine, but I'm super sensitive to like having even just a little quirk in an edit, is usually going to be a conversation in the shows I work on. So I tend to be careful about that. Let's go to the next person, Courtney.
Let me get my mouse over to the unmute button. I am using, of course, the Stellar X2 underslung here into the Rodecaster Pro. Now, I do have a mute switch. I do have an original sound for musicians is turned on right now. That was the mute switch on the Rodecaster Pro. There's a mute, of course, on each input channel. And when I turn it on, it does a complete mute. But like I say, it doesn't give noise assist if I do have original sound off. I'll turn original sound off. As far as microphone placement, it's right here. It's just below the frame, and it's within, I can scratch the microphone with my little finger, so it's within that far from my mouth. And, I've liked this microphone. I have 416s, I have Sheps, and I like this one because I can leave it out all the time, and it sounds pretty good. It imitates, the Stellar is designed to imitate a U47 or U87 in its characteristic sounds, and its FET preamps are designed to mimic that. So I think it does a pretty good job. And I'm using no processing at all. I have all the processing turned off in the Rodecaster Pro 2. So let me know what you think. And let me just give you a chance to turn original sound off. Original sound is now off, and now original sound is now on. So that's the difference between those two. Tell me which one you think is better.
I prefer it off. Or original sound on, I prefer it.
Your air handling is definitely there, though.
Jeff, you were going to say something real quick?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The fan on my computer desktop decided to come on right before we came to me.
You have much more low tones in one of those than in the other.
It just feels like what the original sound does. I mean, among other things, is this, right? to the EQ, and so it sounds just a little bit more muffled because a lot of those high ends are getting knocked out. I think that original sound goes after the detail in the high end, the kind of 6K and above, pretty aggressively. It's a good way to clean up this audio. It just loses its life, and for me when it doesn't have that. So I prefer it with. I'd rather hear the air handling, to be honest. Like, it's not that much air handling. So
it's on now. In fact, it's not air handling. The air conditioner's off, and the computer's fan has now shut off. It's gotten cool enough, I think. Yeah.
Oh, got it. Okay. Did you want to add anything else, Jeff, real quick?
Yeah, I mean, what Courtney is robbing us of is one of the most dramatic demonstrations he did a few weeks back with his fan on and everything else. So, perhaps a skewed test, because it was just amazing when you did the difference before of original sound on and off, and you had the fans and everything, and we didn't hear it when original sound was off.
When it's doing all of that work, Courtney's voice definitely sounds beat up, and it's such a good voice, but when all those fans are going and everything else, I'm glad we're moving into the winter, so that at so many levels.
The bad news is it's a heat pump, so
it's
cold enough that I have to turn it back on again. It's
just
be noisy.
Sweaters. Just invest in sweaters. All right, let's go to George. George, let's go ahead and talk.
All right, so I've just turned on my hardware mute switch, and this is the OC818 into the Revelator IO24 with processing turned on. Now we'll turn off the processing. So this is reality.
Boy, a whole lot more bottom end in your voice.
I like
Insanely more low
reality.
end.
Yeah, it sounds much more natural with it off.
Yeah, it should, because this is a $1,200 mic.
Yeah,
it should sound extremely real and extremely unprocessed, because that's what it is. Yeah.
I would say it sounds at least 5 times better.
And this is the
without
problem of
process.
monitoring yourself in your cans, because in my cans, I prefer the way it sounds processed. But in the real world, we would prefer to hear it unprocessed. And this is a tricky thing. I have an Apollo Twin as well sitting over here.
Yeah.
And that will allow you to monitor your chain while not recording and broadcasting it. So if you're addicted to the way you sound in your headphones a certain way, you can get the best of both worlds. So
when you add the head resonance of what you're hearing, I can see it being better for you in your head. But boy, it sounds a whole lot more real when it's off.
I can turn off. I mean, I'm not using any EQ.
Will you switch back?
I can turn off the high pass filter. That might have been too aggressive before. So now we're just using a gate and a limiter with nothing else. And then I'll turn off the gate and the limiter. So this is without the gate and the limiter.
I don't really hear a lot of difference between the gate and the limiter, because you're probably on a pretty good level. But I think it's the high pass. The high pass filter, for those listening, says I'm going to let everything pass over a certain level. And it sounds like your high pass was...
It was too aggressive.
Maybe 150?
Yeah,
Can we hear it again with it in?
Yeah, sure. So a high pass filter, if I start poking around, so there it is at 40. Here's my high pass filter at 40, which would be way below my voice range. Here it is at 80, so it's just nudging the bottom of my voice.
Right.
And here it is at 160, where it's clearly taking away the bottom octave.
I would leave it at 80,
down.
because that'll take out the 60 hertz noise of things in the room and still let your voice, the timbre of your voice, come through.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. This is it, and this is, again, it's a much more expensive mic than necessary. It's just I was fortunate to receive one
laying around.
I had it laying around. It's a review mic, to be completely honest. And then the Revelator at $150 is just a mind-bogglingly good value. I feel for what it does. So there you go.
You go, Jeff Francis.
Do you have anything between 80 and 160? I want it a little higher than that.
Yeah, right now I'm using presets, but if I dive into the high pass filter, there's actually a knob.
10 or something like that.
So I can knob it up a little bit higher. I can go much, much, much too high.
Whoa.
And then I can go back down to 110, 108, 98, 95. You can
110,
sweep it.
115, something like that.
Yeah, I love that as a sweepable high pass filter. Again, on a $150 audio interface, who the heck has that? Nobody. It's pretty great. It's pretty great.
Let's go to Harshid.
Sure. All right. So I got a SE Electronics V7 microphone that goes into a Yamaha MG10XU mixer. In between, I do have a mute switch. It's a Proco mute switch. I don't have any mids, highs, or lows set. It's all set at 12 o'clock. And my volume gain is set to 100 on my mixer, and as well as my gain level is set to 100.
So you're up as high, you're as loud as you can go.
Right. And my new interface that I'm thinking to go towards is maybe an SSL2 or a Mode 2, just to get me a little bit more range into this microphone. I feel that I suffer from being limited at this point, and noise floor is a little bit annoying too.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think he sounds fine. I think he sounds good. I've tried to talk Harshid about not looking at other microphones, because I think that's a good match for you. And also, I think it's more ergonomic for you to deal with in terms of setting it for your repositioning. So I would leave it the way it is. I think you're sounding good just the way you are.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you, and it's good. The one thing that I think you might want to play with a little bit, most of your voice is coming from your lungs and up. You're not using your diaphragm very much, and you can train yourself into using it more. If you just spend more time than you're spending here reading out loud every day, and concentrate on thinking about supporting your voice from lower in your body, if you can get some more muscle behind the air, I think you can move your voice from all throat and head focus down a little bit, and that might help more articulation.
Good. Thank
But
you
you
so much.
sound fine where you are now, but that's just something to play with.
Go ahead, George.
I'll definitely work on that.
I'm sorry, not George. It's Jeff.
Harshid, I think your positioning is good because you're slightly off to the side, which first of all doesn't block the video of us seeing your face, but also it keeps the plosives out. Every once in a while I noticed that when you turned your head slightly toward the mic, we were getting a plosive. So you may want to just, I know you're dealing with a gain issue, you may want to go just slightly more to the side and be careful about always working past the mic, not into the mic.
All right, let's try to work. Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and another thing to take into consideration is if you've got over-the-ear earmuffs and you have side tone coming into your ears and you're hearing yourself pretty well through both ears, it tends to make you talk less loud because, you know, you're modulating yourself based on what you hear through your earphones. What I like to do is monitor through one ear and keep the other ear open, so I have kind of an idea. I am hearing side tone through one ear, but I'm hearing myself naturally through the rest of the ear, and so I don't tend to hold back. I tend to speak a little bit louder than if I'm hearing myself fed back to myself through both ears and having both ears covered. So you might want to change your monitoring situation or to get your level up, as Bill said, to give you a little more power behind your voice. You know.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Yeah, and the thing about microphones is, you know, it can be a good match for the voice and complement it, and then you can get a better mic, in quotes, that is much more high fidelity, a condenser mic that's more sensitive, and it can now expose things that maybe you didn't want to expose, like room tone and background noise. So, you know, again, yeah, if I wouldn't say upgrading past this mic makes sense unless you were to do a lot of other things first. But I can definitely get behind the SSL2 as a recommendation over the Motu. Motu is amazing as well, but I love the SSL2 because it's class compliant, plug and play, and every single function is a functional knob or button on the box, which I think in a live situation where you're live streaming, you're on camera, to be able to reach over and just touch and grab things and adjust them very quickly is a huge advantage over things like the Motu. So that's just my thought there.
And let's jump to Javier.
Okay, I'm using an AKG 214 with original sound on. I'm going into a Behringer interface with the quote-unquote Midas preamps. So before I threw any more gear, go looting my studio to bring gear or buy something else, I wanted to get your opinion.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I'm biased because I'm a big fan of the Behringer XR stuff. I think it's fantastic. Same kind of a thing where it's an incredibly good value for the cost, and what you get features-wise is kind of in the same way that I keep talking about this Revelator IO24, you get this incredible feature set. And, you know, yeah, I could add a little expander on that to knock down the bit of room tone I'm hearing from a fan. But other than that, I would not have any problem with hearing what I'm hearing.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think this is a good example of a little bit of room tone, or RT60 as George was referring to it, where it's good because just a little bit gives a little bit of quality to the voice that's absolutely, totally dead. I think a dead voice sounds just like it implies. It sounds dead. So I'm hearing a live, but not objectionable so with Javier, that sounds natural to me and very appropriate for a Zoom call.
What's the distance to your mic, Javier?
About 4 fingers, a bit more like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean I would try to knock the room down a little bit. You know, in my opinion, you know, I approach this show as a radio show, so it's probably, you know, being able to, you know, just get a little bit more absorption in there. I don't think you have to do too much, but I think getting a little bit more absorption would probably help a little bit.
I have some panels right over to my right, but I don't have I have a wall just in front of me, so maybe like dampening the
it's the one right in front of you. The ones to the side aren't making any difference.
Yeah.
But the ones above, to George's arrow, if you're not seeing it, is I would put, but it's right in front of you, that wall there. I would cover a lot of, you know, doing something. And, you know, there's putting a sound blanket up, there's also adding fullness. So a lot of times when we just did a shoot, and I added, you know, what I asked for was curtains 100% fullness, which means that they are taking up twice the space. So if you had a 10-foot area, the curtain will take up, you'll take 20 feet of curtain and then pull it all in so it has a lot of folds. And a lot of times I do that that'll get some of the lower end as well as because it'll be a more full absorption than just having it be flat against something as you kind of work through that. Go ahead, Jeff. And we'll have to move pretty quickly through this to get to everybody.
Just wondering what processing Javier's got. It sounds like he's losing a little bit of low end. Maybe he just needs the mic a little closer to get some proximity effect and also to get more signal, less room.
Yeah, there's no processing. It's just like the radio mic. I'm only using the high pass filter on the C214. But other than that, there's no process.
Can you turn off that high pass filter?
Yes. Okay. There's the high pass filter off.
So much better.
And,
much better. Yeah.
Perfect.
High pass filters, if they're low enough, they work. But like when they just click on and off, I find that typically they're usually, as George had outlined, a little too aggressive. To do that. Go ahead, Bill.
To Alex's point, double fullness drapes are what you're seeing over my left shoulder right now. I had a flat wall there and I wasn't happy with it. So I hung an auto pull and hung heavy drapes there, and it really made a substantial difference in the room profile.
Let's go to Serge.
Hi, this is Serge using my Samsung Q2U. Original sound off right now. I never tried with the original sound on, and like most of you guys, I'm not using my Stream Deck anymore to mute myself. I'm using the click of the mouse. It's the most reliable way to do it.
Can you turn original sound on?
Original sound on. I don't have any compression or anything in my flow rates. It's pretty standard. It's not anything added to it. No noise assist. Pretty straightforward.
Go ahead, George.
That's just one of those cheap mics that sounds good. It really, that fidelity is very nice. It has articulation. You can hear, the T's and the K's. It has a little brightness to it without being too much. Your room tone levels are under control. I had no issue at all with you turning on original sound. And, there's a dog, but hey, we all have animals. It makes it more real. Anyway, but yeah, it sounds, I'm really amazed at the quality of the sound of that microphone. There must be a factory in China making those capsules by the billion that has nailed it, and they're like $1 each, because that is really amazing for what it costs.
Can you lean towards it just a little bit and talk?
I'm going to talk into it a little bit more. That's the thing I'm wondering about is I don't have a good stand. I use the stand that came with the microphone. And it's a desk stand, so that's the only thing.
One thing I will say is that I really like the for the price. I really like the Elgato arm. I can't think of the name of it right now, but the Elgato arm,
the Flex arm.
Which one?
LP.
Wave.
It's Wave LP. It's
The Wave
profile
LP,
one.
the lower profile. I like my mics to be underslung. Now I'm using a OC White Ultima, but which has it does have more dexterity. So for my house, I prefer my OC White version of it, which is it's more expensive than my mic. But the Elgato Wave LP is I think $99, and it's just great because you put the mic where it belongs. It doesn't have quite the same dexterity that I have, but I've used it at the office. I bought one because we were testing it for a bunch of other things, and I kept it.
That's an amazing value. I mean, what it's undercutting is 5 times more expensive. So that's
I mean, like this one that I use is a $400 stand, and it's a $99 stand, and I would say that for most, if I wasn't on it 6 hours a day, I'd probably just use the OC, or I'd probably just use the Elgato. Given that this one's kind of part of my system and everything else, and I like being able to tweak tensions and everything else. I like the one that I have, but I would highly recommend that because it changes the way you work with the mic when you can move it. This is something that I think a lot of people, arms are super important to me. We don't send out arms because we're afraid that would turn into a project for folks, but it changes the way you use the mic because you put the mic where it belongs, not where you can get it to and still be able to be comfortable. And I would highly, even if it's over, although I'm a big fan of underslung mics, even if it's an overslung, I would highly recommend one. So it's a great investment. It'll make your audio actually sound better. It's not just good. We're going to run just a little over to get to the last couple people. Go ahead, John.
I passed.
Someone else put you in there. Go ahead, Lois.
Okay, so first off, I don't have any of all of those mechanical devices you're talking about, so don't need any of that. I have a Yeti Nano, and it's plugged into an iMac, and it's using the Zoom controls to control what it does and those settings there. And right now, original sound is on, and I will turn it off and see what that sounds like. And original sound is now off, and I'm still Lois, and I'm still going through a Yeti Nano, and that's what we're doing. So what do y'all think?
Go, George.
They're just, they're aesthetic choices. With original sound on, I'm hearing incredible detail. You sound like an ASMR voice. You could do really good ASMR because the Yetis have extreme high frequency sensitivity and detail. It's the ultimate ASMR mic. Everybody doing ASMR is on a Yeti. You could probably bring it in a little closer to give you some more richness, but at the same time, when you turned off original sound and let Zoom have its way, in some ways it was a little more aesthetically more pleasing because it made it sound a little more richer. It attenuated the mouth noise. So it's fascinating how for you it might be better with it letting Zoom do its thing.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I definitely preferred with original sound off because it kind of got rid of all that cheap condenser capsule high frequency stuff that's going on in the Nano and gave us a little bit of body. So I totally agree with George. Leave original sound off and let Zoom fix your mic for you.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I also agree with the other two. I think original sound off sounds a little bit better. Your voice sounds a little more richer. You get a little more low end timbre in the sound with original sound off because we're hearing a little less detail. The Yeti, I actually, I bought the knockoff $25 Behringer Bigfoot, which is the copy of the Yeti, and it's a pretty faithful copy other than internally the soundboards are arranged differently. I think it uses the same capsules. They can sound okay. It's just big and ugly.
Go ahead, Lois.
So on the settings for the Zoom settings, I have suppress background noise at the highest level. Should I have that on low, high, medium, automatic?
Try going to low.
Okay, now I have it on a low level.
Much better.
Much better.
I'm glad you brought that up. None of us mentioned that there are levels of the amount of processing. And I like that better.
So I don't have any switches or knobs or dials or anything. So all I've got is those settings.
No, I think that kind of is a happy medium because I was leaning against I was waiting to see what everybody else. I was kind of leaning against it because I felt a little muffled. It had this muffled sense to it. When you turn it to low, I think it's the best of both worlds. Like you're getting a more full sound, but it's also cleaner and richer. So I think that the low noise suppression is definitely an improvement over the high, and I think probably a little better than turning original sound on.
So I wanted to also talk about that microphone, that Elgato arm thing.
Yep.
One of the great uses of that is that when you're on a Zoom meeting and there's that one person you really don't want to see because they're doing something weird, you put them down at the bottom of your screen and then you just move your microphone over and it covers up that picture. Works great.
Why is her audio clear? Because she doesn't like Frank. So it's like her audio would be a lot clearer if Frank could just be normal. So that's a funny thing to say. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, can we hear medium real quick? Because with low, we are getting more of the mouth sounds and the things George was talking about.
Okay, so now it's on medium. And by the way, just today, I did move it over to the side a little bit using your suggestions. So there it is on medium.
And go to low?
And now it's on low, but I'm still talking the same direction and this
I like
the mic in the same place.
Yeah, I like low.
Really?
I like low myself. But I will admit, I listen to, I will admit my own bias is that I started listening to NPR like in 1982. Like, so when I was like 12 years old, and so I'm used to a nearly unprocessed Neumann mic. Like that's what and so I have a tendency to lean against anything that reminds me, and I was a DJ for an AM radio station. So I will also tend to lean against anything that reminds me of AM. So an AM is dropping off at 7K, so anything that reminds me of AM, I'm like, oh, I don't want that. Go ahead, Jason.
I've got to reiterate, it sounded like you had a Perkins EQ that was scooping you and it just went away. That was incredible.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
I just have to say, Lois, you achieved for me ASMR because that autonomous meridian response, I had something go up my back when you moved your mic because it was like going, no, don't. It was the weirdest thing.
What the heck is ASMR?
It's the autonomous sensory meridian response. It's like when you hear a particular sound and it literally has a physical effect on you and like a thing, it's like that chills up my spine thing.
And there's YouTube, go to YouTube and just search ASMR.
Well, or don't.
And they make little noises.
Okay.
Kids these days do the weirdest things, okay?
Lost your mind yet because it drives me absolutely crazy.
They play with their ever do that, Alex.
Yeah, I'll stay off those.
And so that's Lois, what I was getting when you're on low, obviously personal preference, and really matters where you're talking. For me, the medium seemed like a happy balance between getting rid of some of that, but still sounding good for what the mic is.
Let's go to Mitchell.
Hi, talking into an AKG 414. It goes into an AFEX channel. And due to a lot of peer pressure and a lot of lobbying on the parts of many of the folks here on the panel, I bypassed all the processing on it. So it's just the mic preamp on it with no EQ, no compression, no limiting, nothing, which drives my radio ears crazy because us radio people love to have processed audio going out over the years. So this is just me with original sound on. Please don't ask me to turn it off because my teeth will fall out.
And you sound wonderful.
Yeah, you sound great. There's nothing to change about your mic setup. And it sounds so much better when it's not processed, in my opinion.
You have the same issue. You wanted to hear yourself in a way in your cans, and it's hard to not hear it. So for you might set up a chain for you and a chain for us, or which would be no chain.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I just wanted to say, did you hear the disappointment and sadness in Mitch's voice when he was explaining how he had to bypass all that stuff?
Bypass all the expensive hardware.
Which I did the same with my, in the other room where I used the Revelator and did off-airs after hours and found the same thing with that chain. I had to turn everything off.
Yeah, we're an NPR crew, so of what that looks like. And I had an AFEX. I mean, I used one for years, and it was, I think what it was is that I think over time, Leo's poking at me about it slowly killed it.
Leo is an AFEX, though. Like, he is the embodiment of
he is the AFEX. So anyway, so go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, behind me, I've got a U87 and a Neve processor, 8801. And yeah, it's okay for that for shaping the sound a little bit. But the other difference here is that I'm a radio guy and I sound like a radio guy. So I'm pushing my voice like Bill was alluding to earlier. I'm pushing my voice out and I'm almost doing a little bit of compression just in the process of talking. Yep. So it's not fair to compare me to everybody else unless you're comparing me to another radio guy like Alex or Bill or Courtney.
Guy.
Go ahead, Bill.
The thing to remember about what Mitch sounds like is that this is years and years and years of practice at articulation. He is far better than me and better than anybody else I've heard in the panel in terms of his precise ability to get every syllable of every word out without sounding like he's staccato talking or something like that. And that is this process of practice, practice, practice. For decades, he's had to sit in front of a microphone and speak clearly. And so he knows how to do that. And it's now become second nature. So his articulation is as flawless as anyone I've ever heard.
And I just want to say, if precise-ability is not a word, it should be. That is a great word. Anyway,
Precisitude, yes.
Thanks very much, Bill.
Yeah, I think Mitch, you have a voice designed for AM radio, not FM radio, and that maybe it came from working all those years in AM radio, but you're positioned at that upper high mid register, which cuts through all the traffic noise of all the people sitting out there in their cars listening on the 405.
Yeah, it lets me cut in and through the panelist when I need to.
Stefan, you're back. Let's give your mic a whirl. Oh, you're still breaking up.
Breakouts now or dropouts. So today I'm using a Browner Pantera, which feeds a Mix Pre 6.2 with noise assist applied at.
Still breaking up.
Gone again.
Stefan, if you come on another time, we'll just give you your own little time there, but you're having some kind of internet connection issue there today. A little bit of a storm in Würzburg. Let's go to Jason.
All right. Well, I will be quick, and I will start by saying that I've been using the F19 key without a single flaw since day one of office hours, and I had truly no issue with it. As far as the chain goes, I have no processing. I'm sorry, I'm looking away from the microphone. There is no processing whatsoever. It's just directly into an Allen & Heath Z14 and then directly into a 6K Pro. There's nothing at all on here, no compression, nothing at all.
Go ahead, George.
Yep, that's a PR40. Just aesthetically, it's not a fave of mine, but it's working. It's doing what it's designed to do, and the noise level is good. I would just reshape the EQ curve on it to get something I prefer aesthetically, but other than that, it's fine.
Good, Mitchell.
Yeah, you sound good. And do you miss your Aphex channel?
Not even a little, Mitch. Honestly, I'm sorry, but I just don't. I missed the $1,000 that I spent on it, but that's a separate issue entirely.
Go ahead, Jeff.
This is really more a question because I think this is the problem I have. I think with your chain, Jason, we hear a little bit of the mouth sound, and so this is really a question. I mean, do folks think that a little bit of EQ or something, or is anyone else even hearing that? Would that take a little bit of that out without affecting the quality?
I always find it's hard. It's really hard to take out without reducing the resolution of the high end. I try to, but I find that trying to get that out of there is hard. It's been my
What
experience.
I need to do is drink more water. Alex is the only person in this whole panel who's heard my voice in the real world, and it was in the middle of a very noisy NAB floor, and for a few minutes several years ago. So, I mean, I don't think that in person I have huge mouth sounds, but I have spent at least a decade in front of this microphone doing exactly this.
Yeah, the mic, it tends to grab onto those things, so you do have to drink a lot. I mean, I will say, you'll notice that I have 2 cups of tea that I work through every show, and so and that I do that specifically to try to keep my mouth.
Yeah, coffee definitely dries up the saliva. I know coffee is the enemy for me.
Oh, like this? Yeah, never.
Tea is definitely coffee earlier, a couple hours before the show is when I have coffee, but tea during the show is
what
good.
Prompted me to raise my hand actually about when Georgia was talking about the mic. I mean, I think Leo has spoiled all of us for what that mic might sound like and do.
It does a really good job of, especially in noisier environments, it does a really good job of off-axis rejection and in a radio-ish sort of way. So if you don't have a lot of control over it and you have someone that knows what to do with it, you can get a pretty good, and especially if you're going to do it in post and you're going to EQ it later, I think it works really well with those controls. So like in a radio booth, we found that the PR40s work pretty well because you can have a bunch of people around moving their papers and doing other things, and we just don't get as much of that. The SMB7s are also good at that, but the SMB7s tend to have less detail in the upper end than the PR40s do when we put them in radio style setups. So that's been the thing that we found. But you're right that there's definitely, when you think about voiceovers, I think that's an issue there.
Well, and what this replaced was an Electro Voice. I had an Electro Voice 20 and a 27, and I like this one substantially more with other people, but not necessarily for me. There's a very, very distinct sound with the Electro Voice.
Let's go ahead and jump in. We got a couple questions, and we're just going to do the 2 audio ones. I know that we're going to push one back it's non-audio, and but we'll we'll address that one tomorrow, Ronnie, if you put that in there tomorrow. So let's go ahead we got 2 questions. Go ahead.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, panelists attempting to adjust framing after checking audio levels unwittingly affect mic proximity. Can we be a bit more ruthless when checking our framing? SuperSource exposes poor framing, small heads beside large ones, and headspace variations. Thank you.
Yeah. The back end is like everybody's off frame.
This is a beautiful pick.
We're working on a solution in the future where you'll be able to, in real time, very subtly, just on your local feed in Zoom, be able to see where you are centered and height wise all the time if you want to. You can go turn it on and off. We're still working on that, but that's going to put the Fenwick frame in. The hard part for us, because we're doing a radio show, but we also are putting it out, is that if you're not right down the center and in kind of the Fenwick frame that we start with at the show, you end up looking a little funky inside of our super sources because they're a little less forgiving. Go ahead, Serge.
I think the panel recommendation for me to have an arm will help with that. That was my main issue, having my mic in the right position and my frame.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to get used to, and I get off on it as well. I get I'm off on off frame, in those areas, and it's a hard one to kind of keep track. But you'll see me kind of realigning myself often because I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, I need to move over a little bit, and so I try to keep track of it as the host or as a panelist. And the other thing that we have to do is try to keep it the same distance and height, because one thing that we got some feedback on is when we get too close to the camera as well, we look really, really big on a TV. Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe they ought to develop some kind of AI to use in the SuperSource that will automatically position the video to center us and size us correctly for that SuperSource, regardless of where we go, since we know that's possible because all these, cameras that are built into a lot of these 4K cameras can automatically center you,
Eventually. As soon as one's affordable. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I have my mic just out of frame on a boom, and it's fixed. It's not moving around. And if I position myself right directly in front of that mic, I'm in the SuperSource zone. So
you're a little too. I think you're a little bigger than the Fenwick frame. I think that's the challenge. So
yeah, if I zoom out, I get the teleprompter starts showing.
You don't want to zoom out. You just want to move back. That's what I do. I just move back until I fit it. So yeah. Just to get back there. Yeah, exactly. Lois?
Okie doke.
I think that the people who are on the panel here regularly are getting good at doing their framing. I've got my own show, the Birding with Lois .global show, and I find it incredibly difficult to explain to a guest why it matters. And so what I've taken to doing is I'll get them in there, I get them reasonably good, and then I'll just adjust my head, so that it matches theirs. So anyway, I think you guys are doing a good job.
We want to build something that we can turn on for a remote participant that is just really light, but tells them, hey, keep it in there. What we found is when you do that kind of thing, people will just find that it'll bother them and they'll just find their way to it. The behavior creates a little bit of stress on their end, but it does correct the behavior. Next question.
And Bart Gaffney from Wisconsin says, Alex, please show us the blankets and how that looks.
I don't have any way to do that right now. I am slowly setting up everything I need to so that I can have a wider shot of my space, which has required me to clean the space too. So the first thing I did was clear. I have so many U-line wire shelves now, and they're all full of things that used to be, around. So I cleaned that up. I got a new carpet because I can't show you this carpet. It's been here for 3 years, and I've been, on shows. So there's a bunch of things that are being added, but then the last thing will be I'm putting a new maker pipe system up above me. I think there's probably OSHA issues with me showing you what I have now, and so I'm gonna get that fixed in the next over the next week, and then I'll be able to hang cameras from it. Right now, I don't think they'd support the camera. This would support the cameras very well. It just barely supports the lights, and it's been sitting here for years, and I'm finally upgrading it. So, but ask me that end of next week, and I'll probably have an answer for you, or be able to show it to you, show you around the studio in general. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
Free business opportunity, designer sound blankets. They are the ugliest things on the planet. And if somebody comes up with a nice looking one, I bet you could sell a lot of them.
Mine, by the way, you can get, they come in all kinds of colors, but there's one set of sound blankets that's 90 pound and it is white on one side and black on the other. And you can order them from Amazon and it is the key to the operation. Don't get blue or orange or anything else. And then just make sure to get it with grommets. I bought mine without grommets because it was cheaper, and then I spent a day nailing grommets through the system because they're too thick to use the little one. You have to pound them, and then you hit your thumb, and then you can see your bone, and then you have to tie it all back up again, and it's not good.
Get a
Not
brad
that that's ever happened
nailer.
to me.
That'll fit.
Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the ones Alex mentioned are excellent because of the white and black. You can control your lighting as well. If you're buying from Harbor Freight, you can get the blue ones. Make sure you get the ones that are cloth. This is Hallmaster. They have some that are kind of a paper composite because they're kind of more disposable. Do not get those; they won't hold up, and they don't reflect. They don't absorb near as much sound as the double stitched all cloth moving blankets.
And the last thing, Jeff wanted to try his underslung mic. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so this is about the same position, same everything else. The mic is now below me. It's about 8-9 inches away from my mouth, but it's pointing up, technically probably pointing at my chin.
In your case, I would say that it sounded better above. Definitely sounded like we had more detail in the upper end there.
I mean, everyone's sinuses are different. I feel like this is just a personal thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I disagree. I kind of like the Richter sound from underneath. And if you look at the polar pattern for that 416, you see over here on the right of the high frequencies, you're only about 12 degrees. But the low frequencies, you have a much broader off pattern. So when you're close to your chest from underneath, you're hearing more low end because it's not off axis. Even if you're off 60 degrees, because those sound canceling vents are very close to your chest. If you're overhead, it's much further away from your chest. That's my 2 cents.
There we go. It was a good hour and some.
If I could throw this out real quick, Alex,
Yeah.
This is what I mentioned is just a little trick for those of us that don't have OBS or something else, is you can just load a Fenwick frame image into Zoom as a virtual background. And while you'll be covering it, it does a decent job of at least getting you ready to go into, and get the real one. So it does the trick.
Oh, that's a good hack.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. Great hour. These are always good. And again, for those of you listening, even if you're not doing this, listening to all the things, this is a bunch of people that do a lot, have done audio for a while, ticking at things. And I think it's a really great way to learn what's happening with the mic and what's happening with the processing and understanding what that language is, whether you decide to use it or not. So anyway, so stay tuned. Stay tuned for more of those in the future. Now we're going to jump into after hours. We're starting a little bit late, but Kenn is going to be talking about web development. Kenn, can you repeat what you're covering?
Yeah, we're going to talk about Google AdWords and how to use a little program that Google gives to find good Google AdWords. We're going to do that with Greg's site.
Nice. So that's going to be in after hours right after the show. Thanks to the producers for a lot of great questions. It was a heavy hour. First hour was a lot of questions. Really, really well done. And we're really, we've moved this time frame because there's more people that can be available for Wednesdays. And we're really excited about really making Wednesdays an audio heavy day. So we're hoping to see a lot of our heavy hitters that are here today that are talking about audio in here. And so if you've got audio questions, I think Wednesdays are going to be a great day to come with your audio questions. I think we're going to have more and more experts that are here. So stay tuned. Both some of our regulars that have done a lot of it, as well as some folks that just show up on Wednesdays to answer your questions about audio. So definitely come on Wednesdays if you're interested in audio. And thanks to our panelists. It's great to see all of you here. Nice big panel, lots of great answers, and willing to be picked apart. It's really it's very brave. So anyway, thanks to our panelists. We can't do this without you. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end every day, 7 days a week, putting this show together. It's a small village approaching a small city that puts this together every single day and volunteers their time to make it happen. So thank you for your contribution. And now we're going to jump into After Hours.
Get to do ASMR for Lois. Lois.
See, Lois, this is what happens.
Why am I supposed to whisper back to you? I thought we weren't supposed to whisper.
I don't think you have to whisper with that mic.
Okay. All right, so I won't whisper.
No, you should whisper. This is the quiet room. You have to whisper. You can't. Oh, my audio is working perfectly.
So then you need to get a cheese grater and a flip-flop and then just do something weird with it.
Burritos?
Okay, I'm going to throw up now. Thank you.
Why is there dentures? No one's done ASMR of getting a COVID test.
It's hard to laugh in whispers, isn't it?
It's a good trick.
Yeah, God, it's the best ASMR idea ever.
No, I'm not going to do it because that's gross. What was that cartoon character that laughed in whispers? He would go, Muttley.
Muttley.